Okay, we're going to call this meeting to order, a study session for the Board of Education. It is August 13th at 5 p.m. If we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and salute to the New Mexico flag in English and in Spanish, as well as the acknowledgement of tribal land. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. Saludo la bandera del Estado de Nuevo México, el símbolo Zia de amistad perfecta entre culturas unidas. We acknowledge the original people of the land, the Tesuque Pueblo people and other tribal nations, and ask them to walk with us today as we share and learn together. Thank you. Now we are on to approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
We've had flooding, we've had all kinds of stuff, and that's why they're not here.
Oh, because she's talking, she brought it up.
Yes, but because of the flooding and everything else, everything's out of disarray.
Okay, thank you.
So we're on to approval of the agenda. Any changes, updates? And if not, could we have a motion?
Can we acknowledge that we're...
Let the record show that Vice President Price and Secretary Garcia are not here.
Recommend we approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, on to the introduction of the interpreter.
And Mr. Martinez, who normally does that, is not here today because he had a family emergency. Dr. Lujan, could you do that, please?
Good evening, audience, school board member, President Noble, Superintendent Dr. Garcia. I'm James Lujan, the Associate Superintendent, and at this time also serve as an interpreter. If there is somebody in need of those services, if you could please raise your hand and I will be more than happy to serve you. En este momento, si alguien necesita traducción o servicios de traducción durante esta junta directiva, yo con mucho gusto le puedo ayudar, solamente levante su mano.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lujan. And as a point of privilege, I just want to take this opportunity to say congratulations to everyone in the district on the first day of school. I know that there were some bumps in the road, plenty to deal with. It would be perhaps boring if there weren't. No, I don't think it would be boring. But you know, I was thinking today as my son went off in a suit that we bought for him to go to school about what a privilege it is to have this moment of hope, this moment of newness, and even for parents, the reflection as each year passes by, and the appreciation that many of us feel as we struggled through childcare through the summer, of the public schools coming back and being there, and the public support system that it is, and all of you that take our kids and care for them all day, every day. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful feeling, that hope and excitement that I saw on social media and in so many kids at my son's school. And, you know, I know it was throughout the city, and our city even sort of breaks for it as everybody deals with the traffic and the new rhythms. So thank you to everyone who played a part in that, and for all the parents who were polite in parking lots, and you know, all of the things. This is truly a community moment, and we don't have that many of them anymore where we all experience something fresh and new together. I was going to write a poem called the Ode to the first day of school, but I got busy. Didn't happen. Okay, on to superintendent announcements and follow-up.
Thank you, Madam President. This will be very brief. I just want to thank all of our site-based people. I got out to 12 sites today, got to deliver apples and take pictures with folks, and it was just to see the teachers hit the ground running, and it's all because of your leadership, and we just have great people at our schools. So proud of them, all the district staff working hard today, and I hope to hit all the rest of the schools before the end of the week. And so it was just so exciting and so fabulous. Milagro, I thought you guys did a great job today, with that beautiful new building and, working out the parking. Santa Fe High had a few of their challenges today. We worked through some of that. 4 schools got through a shelter in place today, not because of anything at the schools, but in the neighborhood. We got through that today. We thought maybe 2 kids had maybe not made it off the bus. We found them today. So all in all, unless there's somebody sleeping on a bus, which has happened before, I don't think it has, it was a great first day. So give yourselves a round of applause. So proud of everybody. Thank you.
No other announcements? Okay. On to our presentation and subject of the study session tonight, the 2018-2019 Student Proficiency Results. NMSBA Transition English Language Art Math, NMSBA Science and Advanced Placement, and initiatives for improving student proficiency outcomes. I appreciate that we're doing this. I don't know if it seems slightly cruel and unusual to do it on the first day of school.
I think we didn't really think all that through at the time when we picked it on this date, but we wanted it to be timely, and this was where it came out. So sorry, gang. I know it was not the best day. But
And
the board may be merciful, and maybe we'll be done by 7.
I hope we can be merciful and be done by 7 or before. And thank you again, Dr. Garcia and Deputy Superintendent Romero, for getting the pizza, or thinking of the pizza for everybody, because I understand eating is tough sometimes on the first day of school, maybe on most days for school-based staff. So we're going to do the presentation. I believe if it is all right with the board, if we hold our questions until the end. That's how you
That
would
would be
like to
great.
proceed?
And just mark your slides, and hopefully, as we work through the presentation, you will get it. This presentation will be, it's the whole team that's up here that will be participating and chiming in as we go through. I will only be introducing Dr. Suchan Serengar, who's right here on the end, newest to our team, our Chief Assessment for Learning Officer, and everybody else will introduce themselves when they get to their slide. So without further ado, we're going to just get going. Some of the slides we're going to move through very quickly, and others, we may we'll obviously spend more time on. So are we ready to go? Okay.
Welcome, Dr. Sugar.
And Ruth was, I thought, doing the driving, and she's not there. Or who's doing the driving? Debbie is. Oh, there you are. I didn't see you. Okay. So, we have, since I've been here, taken an approach of leading with the head and the heart. The head is around data-driven decision-making and results and outcomes, but the heart also is about relationships and about building team and looking at children holistically, and that you need both of them to be able to move a district forward, to be able to connect with children, and to the work that we're in. You get 2 out of balance with one or the other, you have problems. I'd like to go to the next slide. In leading with the head and the heart, I think you've heard this before, we really do focus on data-driven decision-making. And then improvement in alignment and articulation of instructional materials. It's something, when we talk about leading with the head, that's the head side. And it's something that I know has been very important to this board. And our next big frontier is mathematics, where we will finally be aligned in that area around instructional materials. Again, teaching the Common Core standards, data analysis to prove instructional practice. And when we talk about Dr. Serengar's position and how we're using assessment, it's not to evaluate, make judgments based on one test score about our teachers. It's not about making judgments based on test scores on individual principals, but really, how do we use these test scores to improve instruction? Because if we're not using the data to improve instruction and that our kids are proficient and what supports people need, you can't use one single snapshot of data to make a judgment about a school, about a district. And I think that is what the state is moving to, is a comprehensive system of evaluation, that you're looking at multiple factors. That is not to say proficiency is not important, but you have to look at multiple assessments, not just one data point. We want to provide our teachers effective methods to utilize data to improve instructional practices. We want focused professional development and coaching based on data, and focused district resources for instructional improvement. On the heart side, keeping the joy of teaching and learning, educating the whole child, implementing multi-tiered system of support, where we look at various interventions for children to help them be successful. Working at the site and at the district in building positive relations and creating positive school cultures. The strategic plan and the guiding principles that you'll see in a minute, and engaging our community partners and stakeholders. You've already seen the attributes of the graduate because you helped develop them, but as we look at what we want for our kids, academic proficiency is one major component, but we're also trying to build a lot of other things that are not measured by the park, right, or that are not measured by iStation, whether right now, computer and media literate. That is, something that is very important to us, but it's not measured in that way. How do we measure creative problem solver, critical thinker, exhibiting grit and courage? We are working on a system to evaluate these attributes. We are a leader in the state in assessment for learning and a comprehensive system of assessment. We are piloting a program with Innovate Educate to measure these attributes so that as kids engage in project-based learning, they can start to build a portfolio to demonstrate these, and we've tied these to the ITSE standards. And that will come in a presentation at a much later date. Our core beliefs, which came out of Project North Star, this was our North Star. When we met with people about what we believed in public education, you helped craft these after you saw all the input. All right, so now to what we came to here, student achievement results. Now I need to go to a different page here. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Suchant Sarangar, and he is our Chief Assessment for Learning and School Improvement Officer. He has more than 30 years of experience encompassing instruction, research, evaluation, administration, and consultation from elementary level to graduate school, both in Thailand and in the United States. He has served as Associate Superintendent for Data Analysis in Hobbs, Assistant Superintendent for Assessment and Technology in Roswell, and Director of Assessment and Research in Las Cruces. While at Hobbs, he piloted the Hobbs Municipal School Data Dashboard, a couple of volunteer schools. The project excited other schools who wanted to be part of the project. Eventually, he and his staff were awarded by the district to study the Strategic Data Project at Harvard University for 2 years, and the HMS Data Dashboard pilot project proposed was expanded. An article of their capstone project titled Paperless Data Communication Innovative Process was published in the Harvard University Journal. The dashboard was fully implemented in the 17-18 school year. Dr. Sarangar also served as the head of research and evaluation in Thailand, where he also taught statistics, research, and evaluation. In '88, he undertook pursuing his PhD at New Mexico State with an emphasis in curriculum and instruction and statistics. And just as an anecdotal note, when I was Secretary of Education, I would not release statewide data until he had proofed it and proved it so that we wouldn't put it out and have problems across the state. As a side note, and I don't like to toot my own horn, but I just want you to know my background in statistics. I'm a psychometrician. I was a diagnostician. When I worked on my doctorate, I took advanced statistics, and my dissertation used a quantitative and qualitative research design. So I also am well-versed in educational statistics. With that said, let's go to the next slide. So I just want to say, first of all, that we moved from the Partnership for Assessment for Readiness for College and Careers, the PARC, to the Transition Assessment, it's called the New Mexico Standards-Based Transition Assessment of Mathematics and English Language Arts. But what it's important for people to understand that it is still produced by Pearson. It still uses the PARC items. However, it's a shortened test. And the results of that means is that those items are going to be weighted at a heavier level, right? Now, they have done some crosswalk, but from Dr. Sarangarm's analysis and reviewing it, and from our colleagues across the state, in mathematics, I think some of the weighting was perhaps a little heavier, because you look at the whole state and it went down in math. We pretty much stayed the same, but statewide, that was, I think, a little bit of a phenomenon in the weighting and less items. So that's all I really want to say about this slide. I want to go to the next one, and then Dr. Sarangarm will start going into results. So those are the thresholds for proficient, 750 to 850, okay? But where a state can choose what they believe is proficient. And so some states have rated kids are as proficient at 725 or 730, okay? So that is a decision, and New Mexico could have decided for this year that they wanted to have gone to a different proficiency level. But there's just a lot of reasons how people make that decision. So it is not necessarily cast in concrete how that is decided. But for what we're all being measured by is level 4 and 5 of meeting academic expectations or exceeding, and also how many kids have we moved to those levels, and we'll talk about that later as Dr. Sarangarm has done a bit of a cohort study for us to just look, because right now, just so you are aware, when we look at third graders and we grow in third grade, we're looking at different kids. And so you're going to see a great volatility with those schools that have a lower end size, where they go up and they go down, because you're looking at totally different groups of kids. And statewide, and he'll talk about this later, it's very difficult to move large end sizes, large percentage points. That's why you see the state moving at 2% or 3%. And you look at across the country, if you look at ACT or SAT over the years, where they'll go up 0.25% or go down, that's a statistical phenomena because of large end size. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. So Dr. Sarangarm, please, slide 10.
Okay. Yes, sir. Appreciate, sir. One more time. Madam President, Noble, member of the board, Superintendent Dr. Garcia. By the way, thank you for introduction. I really appreciate so much. Thank you. From this slide, you can see the 5-year percent proficient. What I mean percent proficient is level 4 and level 5 combined. And you can see that in 1 year we gain 2%. It's slightly higher than the state gain, about 1.6%. If you see the vertical line, the blue line, indicate that this administration working that year start. So if you can compare 26% the year before and 31%, this group of administration contribute to the student achievement about 5%. You may think that 5% is small number. Translate to number of kids is, you talk about over 400 kids in 3 years. 400 kids, you move the kid from not proficient to be proficient. I think it's a lot. I would to echo Superintendent Garcia that it's hard to move the big district in terms of percent proficiency. One more time. It's hard to move percent proficiency. You need to translate that to the number of kids that we move. So what I mean, like this year, 2%, you translate that is over 100 kids, almost 200 kids. In a year that group, this administration moved the kid up. Okay, next slide. So from this slide, indicate that we have 10 schools that perform better than the state.
And
The state
that does include Academy for Technology and the Classics,
So
because
it's
they were in our
9.
data, but it's nine of our schools that were significantly different, higher than the state proficiency rate.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent Garcia. And if you look at that, the range of the proficiency is 34% to 71%. And Montgomery, that the school have 71% is excellent. Carlos Gilbert, 62%. Mandela, 69% is amazing. So just example, next slide. This slide indicate that our school district remain the same percent proficiency from this year to last year. Compared to the state, drop almost 2%, 1.4%. Well, I want to echo Dr. Garcia when she mentioned that the state reduced the number of items about 1.5 hours of testing. I think it's affect the percent proficiency throughout the state. If you look at the other school districts, drop a lot. But our remain, I think it's good news. Next. We have 10 schools that perform at or above the state, range from 21% to 59%. Again, that Montgomery is excellent school, both ELA and math. This one, if you can see that 59% proficient, and other school did very good job, 48% is Carlos Gilbert, an excellent one. Next.
I do want to comment, go back, Dr. Sarangar.
Yeah.
Ramirez Thomas grew, and I think in both, 3%, but in terms of the demographics, when we look at that later, you'll see that that was significant that in math, Ramirez Thomas scored at 26.4%, where the state average was 20.2%. And you know, we're always looking at all of our schools. We've met with Ms. Devote, right? Several of our principals that are getting these consistent gains, and we're implementing a lot of those strategies that you will see later in the presentation.
Yes, ma'am. Next slide. Okay, this one. There are the first 4 columns. Look at let's look at the first 2 columns, which is ELA. You look at the ELA percent proficient. As I mentioned to you before, and Dr. Garcia before, that you have 9 schools above the state, and they highlight in the green. And the growth on the ELA growth ELA is 1.4%, and we have 12 schools. The growth is higher than the state. I want to highlight some schools. For example, Carlos Gilbert, 8%. Francis Nova?
Nava?
No, whatever. 9.4%. Okay, and look at our high school. It's probably one of the best gain that we have, 9%. So that's just what I want to highlight to you.
Before we go on from this slide, I just do want to comment that Santa Fe's county's mobility rate, because they don't do it just for we have to look at mobility around the county. which we're the biggest part of it in terms of schools, was 22.5%. That's kids moving from school to school, in and out of our schools. That greatly affects, if the kids are moving from here to there, that also impacts our performance. The other is chronic absenteeism. And this is excused and unexcused, and at the time that we have this presentation, I don't have it for you by school. And, I know that there's lots of reasons why kids are excused, but when you look at that, that's 23.8% of our kids are absent a year, last year. That means they missed 43 days of school.
Yes.
That's almost a 9-week period. And when you have that many kids that are missing that much school, it can't help but affect, which is why we have moved very strongly on this Truancy and Attendance Summit. We've had 2 of them, and now we've met into a subgroup, and I haven't had time to get the email out, but I talked to President Noble that I'd like one member of the board to represent the board with the work group, because we're trying to align county, city, and that's part of our action plan for improvement, because if the kids aren't here, we can't teach them. We also have to make a point of sharing with people how important it is that even though you're planning, it's an unexcused absence, it's impacting the kids to not be here when we're missing that much. And if that's the average of 23.8%, then think how much higher some kids' absenteeism may be, right?
Yes.
And we have judges on this group, the Attorney General's office, the District Attorney's office is working with us. Ideas have come up, like even similar to a teen court for attendance court that has like a restorative justice element, not, punitive, like we're gonna report you to the judge and they're gonna put you in jail, but rather how can we really work to find out what is impacting it? Because I think those are factors that we have, we don't talk about enough, that it's impacting teaching and learning. The other piece that I think is important in this regard is that the homelessness rate is also continuing to grow, and this is also an impact, which is why it's so important to have this, these support services, like communities and schools and other kinds of supports for our kids. But lastly, the mobility rate. When we've talked, back to the mobility rate, when we've talked about aligning instructional materials and moving the district slowly from each school making their own decisions, right, to being more of a system of schools, this is highly important because as our kids move from school to school and they're using a different math series, a different reading series, it's an adjustment, and there may be some holes in their learning, right? So as we've moved to more alignment over this next 3 years, I think you're going to, we've been laying a foundation that you're going to see better outcomes as we continue to move forward. As you look at these, and you look at the next slide too, if you want to move forward, Dr. Sarangar,
Yes.
is that we, there is still, and again, it's not an excuse, but there is a strong correlation. I'm not saying it's causation, because you can't say correlations are causational, but there is a strong correlation between low income and high English language arts and lower student performance compared to, and the data is there, the data are what the data are, compared to those schools that have lower free and reduced lunch and lower numbers of ELL. And it means all of our kids can learn, all of our kids are capable. We're moving in the right direction by providing more support to those schools. I think the extended learning and the K-5 plus will make a difference. I know as the state allocates pre-K, they tend to look at those schools that have more free and reduced lunch. And we'll move on from that. But I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say, Dr. Sarangarma, about this data?
Just want to say that we have 16 schools have higher gain than the state. The highlight, the school that I want to share is Mandela 9%, La Miles 6%, and Pignon 4%. In spite the state dropped 2%. Next.
And so this one's just my quote. I'll just let you read it. But this is what was in our press release. and it didn't make it into the paper. But I think what's important here is that the difference in performance, I'm just going to read the last part of the quote, highlights the importance of the Ozzie Martinez court decision, which requires the state to provide sufficient funding so that districts have the resources to provide culturally and linguistically relevant instruction and materials to mitigate the impacts of poverty that places so many of our at-risk students at a higher probability for achieving lower proficiency rates. And we will talk as we move through this next year if the state will look at some flexibility around K-5 plus that maybe we designate 2 or 3 schools and go school-wide so we could have a bigger impact in helping accelerate their growth with those additional 25 days of school. Don't want to freak anybody out. Okay, will be a lot of community conversations, a lot of board discussion, see what the PED will do. But I've heard some signals from the legislature that, and because it's been so hard to implement that program, right? Because many of you principals couldn't get the 5 teachers, right? If people knew from the beginning of the year for next year that and we'd have to work with the unions. So again, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but can we leverage work, impacting 2 or 3 schools with that additional 25 days with all the teachers and perhaps be able to move the needle a little bit more? Because we do know that those interventions work.
From this slide, we look at 3 years. As I mentioned to you that the district moved the kid to be proficient 5% for last 3 years, 5%. So we look at how many schools perform at 5 or more %. So we have 14 schools. And if you look at the school, for example, Mandela, 27% over 3 years increased the kid to be proficient. Capital High School, 13%. Santa Fe High School, 10%. And Carlos Gilbert, 12%. Pinion, 12%. And on and on and on. They're a great school, I'm saying.
Ortiz, I'm proud of their growth.
Yeah.
Right?
If
What
I
was
miss it,
that?
I'm
Well, all of
apologize.
them. We're proud of all of you, all the schools that are, that made this sort of gain over the last 3 years. But I do want to highlight Ortiz with the challenges that we've had in keeping staff and attracting staff. And we're actually having an open house, I think with long-term subs, but we want to talk to teachers that maybe passed up a job there and have them just come and see what a great school that is. And if you walk the halls of that school, the things that are going on, but with the challenges with having not the staff that they needed to have a 5%, I'm just really proud of Ortiz and the work that is happening there. And again, they feed on to capital, so it just affects everybody, right, as all of us. And we know we're going to see this list continue to grow. Pinon, 11.7%. Again, we're working with Ms. Devoti, but Capital, 12.5%. Santa Fe High, like you said, 10.5%. Eco, 7.1%. So proud of all of you, but these are the highlights. Thank you.
So I want to echo Superintendent Dr. Garcia that the one that we show you so far is different group of the kids that we compare over 5 years. Let's see that we follow the same kid throughout 3 years. The gain, we look at from high school perspective. That's what we want to highlight in ELA. From 7th grade to 8th grade to 9th grade, they increased from 22% to 28%. The same kid increased 6%. From 8th grade to 9th grade to 10th grade, the same kid gained 11%. If you listen carefully, this one, from 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade, 21%. Same kid follow.
Group of kids.
Like Sujin. Last year you are 11th grade, Sujin 10th grade, and Sujin 9th grade. Count the same kid throughout 3 years. That's what it is. The kid gained 21%. And you can see that the school in Santa Fe High and Capitol High gain over 10%, different cohort, but same cohort, they gain 21%. That's what I want to highlight. Next, please.
And again, when he's saying kid, he's saying kids. It's the same cohort of kids that were following them through the 3 years. And that's significant gain that you don't pick up when you're just looking at grade to grade proficiency rates, right? Are we growing the students? And, we don't get credit from that from the state. But what's more important are these kids getting, growing along with their skills. There's also a phenomenon that was brought up to me on the high schools on ELA. And Linda or somebody helped me. That was pointed out to me by the high school folks, is that for English language arts, right, if they pass the test at, they're proficient at 10th grade, they're still required, it's almost very similar content, again at 11th to take the test. And
what happens is many of the students don't want to take it again, so they don't. So we've really had to push students to take that test again. And in the old days in the SBA, they only had to take it once, or the communications, remember that test. So they only had to take it once. Our kids have to keep taking it, and I think that's been really a hardship on the kids.
so then when the kids don't take it, or they don't take it seriously, all those kids that are proficient, or for various reasons don't take it, because they're not taking a course, maybe they're involved in AP or some other class, and you're going to see this in math. Some of our higher performing students are not taking the test. That depresses it. Now, granted, that's happening across the state. But when we look at the growth of our students in the cohort rate, it's very encouraging. That at least we know we're growing the kids at the high school as we're preparing them for college and career. So now on the 3-year analysis on math, Dr. Sarangar?
Yes, in math, the same thing. Keep in mind that state drop almost 2%. Okay, state drop. And if we look at 3-year analysis, look at any school that move 5%. You know that at the district, we move 5%. So we have 7 schools. Look at Mandela, 22% increase in 3 years. Okay, next. Next, we're gonna talk about science. These tests they call New Mexico Standard Based Assessment, or they call SBA in science. In POC or in transition SBA math, transition math or ELA, there are 5 levels. However, in this one we have 4 levels. Level 3 and level 4 consider proficient, so we combine to tell you that how many percent proficient, so we can combine proficient and advanced, which is level 3 and level 4. Next.
Now this test, if I may, is not, they have not aligned this one to the next gen standards.
No, ma'am.
And so while we're implementing the curriculum, it's still the old assessment. So I think that that has something to do with where we're teaching, and I think that's why you see a drop for the district, but you also see a drop in the state as more schools are adopting next-gen science.
For this slide, you can see that for last 3 years, we have flat trend, both the district and state. It seemed to me that we have dropped 2% and the state dropped 3%. Next, please. In this slide, you will see that we have 8 schools that percent proficient or advanced higher than the state, which is 39%. I would like to highlight Lataya, 61%.
Asekia Madre, Amy Beal, Atalaya, and Mandela
Yes, 60-something percent. Yeah.
had higher percent proficient, and ECO grew, what was that, 24.8%
Yes,
at
ma'am.
ECO, so, go ECO. I know they did a lot more project-based learning, and a lot of projects that involved a lot of science this last year.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Otherwise, people are gonna laugh when they
That's
read it.
okay. I'll just, because I know it's difficult with the names of our schools, you'll get them. El Dorado also had 69.9% proficient, Wood Gormley 72.2, Pinon 66.7, Carlos Gilbert 82%. So we highlighted the districts that were above the state average, but we have many schools that are getting pretty close. And then we can highlight their growth in terms of percent. And as you look at it in terms of free and reduced lunch, you can kind of look across and see where we're at with that.
Oh, I read to skip this, the same, right, Dr. Garcia mentioned before, the same concept, this one, and next slide, the same thing. Oh, James, oh, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. James Lujan,
Sorry.
Associate Superintendent. Good evening, President Noble, Superintendent Dr. Garcia, and members of the board. As you can see, Dr. Sarangarm was explaining, this is a one-year analysis of the SBA science grades. These are the higher percentage of students proficient in science for this past year. And keep in mind that the state was at 39%. So as Dr. Garcia mentioned, we have our schools here highlighted: Gonzalez Community at 40.8%, El Dorado Community at 68.7%, and Mandela International Magnet School. I do want to say that our secondary school science teachers continue to engage our students in these project-based learning, but then also innovate those students in student-centered learning centers that are real, they're multifaceted. As we do our observations as supervisors and also supporters of the schools, we see where science teachers also value the individual critical thinking and voice, which I think is very important. Next slide is also some elementaries that made some notable gains over the state average of 39%. Atalaya, Acequia Madre, Pinon, Wood Gormley, Carlos Gilbert, Amy Bill Community School, and El Dorado. Again, you know, our teachers, science teachers, with the support of their principal, continue to use the Inquiry Science Education Consortium, which is the ISEC. We do have ISEC coordinators, which are our current science teachers that receive a stipend, and they attend about 6 trainings within the year, which are on Saturdays. They, all the schools have an ISEC representative in their school who support the science initiatives, and we will continue K through 6 to use the FOSS curriculum, which are part of the Lano Foundation kits. And so it's just, I'm very proud of our teachers and our principals, our coaches that also hands-on deck. So thank you to you, behind.
President Noble, members of the board, I just wanted to also remind you that we just finished purchasing all of the new science instructional materials, over $1 million worth, and we were moving it out quickly to all of the schools. We had a huge PD on the 8th for every teacher. We did NGSS training all last year, but now this training was over the new instructional materials. So with that, and combined where I think they are going to modify that test, the science test this year, to match the NGSS, I think you'll see better results next year, and I'm excited about that.
So just because I know we're hearing a lot of acronyms, so the NGSS is the Next Generation Science Standards. So just keep in mind, together, the NGSS in their entirety, plus the New Mexico 6 specific standards, comprise the New Mexico STEM Ready Science Standards. So that's where we're at, and I know there'll be more in the future.
Thank you, all of you. I do want to, forgot to say something before we talk about, you can leave that slide there before we talk about AP. I want to go back to the math at the high school level. So when you take a class, I mean, you have to be enrolled in a class to take the test, all right? So we test for Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. All right. Some of our students are advanced and are taking, you know, they might be taking geometry, or they're taking calculus, or they're taking an AP course. They're not in that group of kids who are taking the math classes. So that all, and again, the rest of the state suffers from that, but we do have quite a few of our kids that choose to take AP or take a dual credit course that are not in that. So when people see, oh my gosh, you've got 2% or 10% or whatever percent proficient at Santa Fe High or Capitol High, it's not capturing those kids. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for Mandela, because it's an IB program, They don't take AP, right? They're in the IB program. So they're, going to probably be taking the tests. So that also makes, and we're proud of Mandela, but I mean, it is a factor that you have to look at, that those kids are actually taking the exam, where our most advanced students are not. Okay. AP, Dr. Serengar.
Yes, ma'am. The AP stands for Advanced Placement. In 1 year, we increased 8%. You know what it means? It means translate that we moved the kid up about 50 kids over 1 year from not level 1, 2, 3, level 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Next.
And
AP
this is, I'm
score.
sorry, this is Larry's, I think, isn't it? Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The AP score have 5 levels. Normally, level 3, level 4, level 5, if the kid scores 3, 4, or 5, normally they qualify for the college courses.
Larry Chavez, Assistant Superintendent, Board President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Garcia. What we're looking at now is a district snapshot of AP scores. In 2015-16 school year, 40% of AP test takers achieved scores of 3 or higher. Since then, the district has seen an increase of 16%. During the school year 2018-19, we saw 299 students score a 3 or higher, which is the highest in comparison with any of the previous 5 years. Last school year 18-19, Capital saw an 11% increase of students scoring 3 or above from the previous school years. This showed that 40% of AP test takers achieved a score of 3% or 3+ or higher. Again, Santa Fe High saw an increase. Their overall percentage was a 10% jump. The percent of students scoring a 3 or higher rose from 72% to 82%.
So, here's all the test results, and so what is our plan to continue to improve? I am very proud of the trajectory that we've been on. Starting from our first year, just building relationships and building culture and understanding the schools and kind of the low-hanging fruit that we were able to take advantage of in terms of improvement, changing our practices, expanding, going deeper. There was a lot that has happened over the 3 years. And so what you're going to see in this action plan are things that we're continuing and things that we are strengthening or expanding, and some things that we're doing brand new. So last year, we introduced Team Santa Fe. I found it was very difficult. Fortunately, I had a very experienced principal who has worked at the district level, and that was Dr. Sanchez. And so she pretty much was on her own. So I said, this next year, I cannot supervise a school. I just could not give it the attention that it deserved. So we have changed the assignments. We also are going deeper. Last year, our chief academic strategist really was trying to understand our data, understand our schools, gave us a lot of input, but we have, selected some schools that we really want to focus in terms of, well, all the schools we want to move, but we're looking at various expertise and how we're assigning. So as you know, Deputy Superintendent Sink, I had to pry her hands away from the schools because she has cut back on her FTE. She wanted to keep more, but she said, you got to let me have one school. So she will be working with Mandela and with all the schools really in different ways, but Mandela will be her school. Dr. Lujan will have Amy Bill, Carlos Gilbert, El Dorado, Kearney, Pinon, Gormley, and Nye. Associate Superintendent Romero will have those schools, as you can see. New to the team in terms of supervision is our chief academic strategist who will have Cesar Chavez, Ortiz, Ramirez, Thomas, Salazar, and Sweeney. And Assistant Superintendent Chavez many of you know, as our athletic director, actually has a very strong academic background and experience in school supervision and as a principal, and he will be supervising Academy, Capitol High, and Santa Fe High. Academy and the Engage and Bridge program will really be highlighted this year as we look at how we've talked to you about that. How do we redesign and really make the Academy even bigger and stronger than what it has been now in this era of digital learning? And so we're very excited about where we're moving with that, and very excited about Team Santa Fe. Some growing pains with this. And can I pick on you, Mr. Morano? Thank you, Mr. Morano. You're very kind. And I think he's an example of a lot of our principals. They don't want to bother district staff, right? So they get frustrated, and they're spending a lot of time sometimes when they can't get a purchase order, or they can't get a phone call answered, or whatever. And so I said, you got to use these guys, because when you see what's coming up for them, I want them to spend more time as instructional leaders. And when you see what the icing on the cake at the end of the presentation, the tool that we have for them to be, I've never had anybody on staff. I know what I've wanted, but I've never had anybody on staff that could do it. We now have somebody on staff that can provide the tool to help these guys really move and focus on improving and individualizing instruction. So principals, please use these guys, and if you still need help, you have my text number, call me, because we want them to truly have more time to be in the classroom and less time dealing with the bureaucracy. And public education is so highly regulated, and it's very bureaucratic. It is just the nature of the beast. So let us help you with that. All right. So as we go to the next slide, I want to just share something with you. I'm not going to read those goals to you all the way through, but these are goals that you approved in the strategic plan. In your folders, board members and officers, you have a copy of the strategic plan. Now, something you haven't seen in great detail are the work plans. And so they're there, but I don't want you to delve into them or try to edit them or fix them, because you guys are focused on the big picture, on the goals, all right? So you got to trust us that we're going to deal with this. But as we move forward and you guys come up with new initiatives, I'm asking you to leave these here, keep them at your desks up here at the dais. Because as we come up with new initiatives, we're going to say, okay, where does that fit? And what are we going to shift from here? Because this team that is leading this, that impacts all of them, all of these initiatives and activities, doesn't just stay with us to do it. They're having to focus on it too. And so as I know you want improved proficiency, so do I. But we also have to look at what are we asking the district and what are we asking our principals to do. So if we can keep all of this together. But we set a plan for where we want it to be by 2020, by the time we got it approved. And so our aspirational goal was for 60% of our students to meet or exceed ELA proficiency by 2022, 2023. That was approved by the board. We're looking at an annual target of 2.5%. And for ELA, we were there. For math, we're going to have to speed up our efforts because we didn't make it for this year. Neither did the rest. Actually, the rest of the state went down. We held our own. But we didn't make the 2.5% annually that the board approved for math. And so we do have a Math Matters Santa Fe initiative that we're rolling out, and you'll hear about that more in a little bit. In your strategic plan, it has the aspirational goal of 60% of our students to meet or exceed science proficiency by 2023 at a minimum of 40%. And then we didn't really set benchmark per year. However, what we have to deal with this is the fact that we'll see what they do with the test and what they do with the standards. So we will still keep pedal to the metal in terms of improving that. Let's go to the next slide. And I need to go to my... So we rolled this out at the Leadership Institute. And have you met with the principals on these expectations already in your group meeting? Or that's coming up, right? And what slide number is that? Because I'm on two different presentations. What slide is it? 35. So, and this is why we want the superintendents to really utilize their supervisors more. Now, it's not all just on them. I mean, we're working together, the digital coaches, the instructional, the interventionists at your schools, the CNI team, they're all getting trained on the tool, the special education department. I mean, everybody is focused on this. So it's not that the principals are out there alone, but we have now standardized the expectations for principals and assistant principals. Some of this has been happening, of course, but we've never really put it out in a framework where it is explicitly clear that this is expected and not a suggestion for every principal. And then they will have this to be able to share with their teachers that they're not being the meanie at their school. All schools are being required to do this, okay? Because I know it's difficult out there for our principals. Well, we don't have to do that at my school. Why are you doing it at that one? So all principals will require that all teachers' lesson plans are based on the state standards for all content areas. And the PLCs stand for the professional learning communities, and you'll hear more about that. And many schools had professional learning communities. Some, they weren't as organized, but with the new data tool that you're going to see, they will have some tools that will make those PLCs more meaningful. Data-driven, and then you can see as evidenced by, I'm not going to go through it too much, but I want to highlight that at K-6, where we did actually this year, right, Linda, on reading, on ELA, we required a 90-minute block for reading, but this year, math also, inclusive of small group instruction. In 7th through 12th grade, small group instruction, which includes opportunities for student work on skill gaps, and we're providing tools on those skill gaps. That has been a major issue at the high school, is the skill gaps, and a lot of our instructors, they were not trained to individualize instruction. So we're providing them tools to help them do that. This, the math, we have had some principals say to me, can we revisit the 90 minutes? Could we go to 70 minutes? I said, let's go this first 9 weeks. Let's see where we are. Let's see how that works. That doesn't mean they can't integrate other content in there, but we want a 90-minute block for math. We are so behind in mathematics. If we keep doing what we've been doing, we're going to keep getting what we've been getting. And now we believe, unfortunately, this is the year where we get to adopt math materials. And so that's why the standards-based instruction is so important, because regardless of what book you're using, the math standard is what the math standard is for a particular grade level in different areas of mathematics, as well as ELA. So the next requirement is data-driven instruction, utilizing data to ensure teachers adjust instruction for improvement, working with district staff to strategically target specific standards. So the principals and some APs got the first look at our new assessment for learning tool, and we will be implementing that. There will be more training on that to help them do data-driven instruction. The professional learning communities, we're requiring our principals or APs or interventionists, they must attend the professional learning communities at grade level or on the content teams on a weekly basis. So once a week at every school, we're discussing instruction. And a lot of this was already happening last year at varying degrees in all the schools. We're just making it more explicit. Members, the supervisors will also be attending at these teams, as will district teams. Dr. Ryan's digital coaches, as well as the interventionists, will be a part of this. We want to make sure that special education is included in this as well. And then lastly, observation and feedback. Conduct biweekly informal classroom observations. See all teachers within the 10-day period to provide feedback to teachers on classroom instruction. And again, it's not about catching anybody. It's not about gotcha not doing what you should be doing, but rather, again, and is their role in instructional leaders, they need to be providing feedback on instruction. I mean, that is our core work. So this is explicit and required of all principals in the district. And now with that, implement professional development plan.
Good evening, board members, President Noble, Dr. Garcia. As you know, we have had a tremendous amount of professional development in the last 3 years. So what we're going to do a little differently this year is go deep. We're going to be sending out all of my teams that are in our departments. We will have this team out in schools. We will watch for where we need some more help, some more support, continuing the training where we need it. But for the most part, what we're going to do is really coaching, especially those teachers that are struggling, getting that information from data, getting that information from the principals, et cetera. So instead of this big, warehouse of PD, if you will, we make it smaller, we make it tailored to the schools now, and make sure that we're right there with the data on where they need that professional development or training. One example on the PLCs that we just talked about a minute ago, we had 3 full days of every school with the gentleman that came in and helped us really understand how to run a well-oiled machine, if you will, of a PLC meeting. And so they got a lot of training. Every school brought a team. It wasn't just the principals, it was teachers and staff as well. As you saw, for involving that professional development plan is part of that expectations of the principals and assistant principals. The assessment for learning, that phrase really, I'm going to leave for Debbie and Suchin to talk about in a few minutes, because that's our exciting kind of new thing that Suchin has brought to our district. Read First Santa Fe, I truly believe that Read First Santa Fe, with the amount of time we spent and really focused, and then we drilled down more expectations on what would we need to see when we walk in a classroom. And we really made that explicit, if you remember. We also really pounced, and you guys helped us make sure that we all were using the same instructional materials. We did PD on that, so we've really worked hard, and our scores are showing it. I really do want to say tonight that I am so excited and proud of our 2 high schools. They have done so well in ELA in the last 3 years, and this past year, they blew us away. And I think, at the end of the day, that's where the buck stops, is in high school. And if we're starting to see that change in high school, and as Dr. Garcia said, we're moving that dial. It's moving, and I'm excited that we're going to get to that 40 or many schools above the 40 in 2022. So having said that, this Math Matters initiative I'm going to talk about in just a second. In fact, I think I'll just go to it because we
And it actually should be Math Matters Santa Fe, but it got left. Oh, there it says that.
Yeah.
But you don't want to be there yet. Go back, right? You haven't finished your.
Yeah, I have. The PD. I talked about the professional
yes,
learning
you have.
communities.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Yes. So what I'm trying to say is, kind of a long story short here, is that we're going to take the same idea, and this is kind of this brainwave this summer, that we're going to take the same idea that, and we know that Read First Santa Fe generated from you all. So we're proud of that, and we're proud that we were able to make it come to life. And now what we want to do is take that same idea and hit it in math. And we're going to call it Math Matters Santa Fe. We're going to do some of the similar things again. We're going to really push hard on a system of what we should see in a framework within the classrooms. We're going to use data-driven instruction again, whether it's for each teacher or for during the PLCs. We're going to be providing district coaches to help with struggling teachers and to help them in PLCs. The Santa Fe team here will also be at PLCs and working with that. Again, the exemplar math class framework we're going to go over in just a minute with Vanessa. We're going to continue with our high quality engaging Tier 1 math instruction, but more importantly, I just want you to know how important it is that we get new math instructional materials. They're 7 years old. We've got to have new materials. Right now, we are trying to help supplement, but we're not going to wait for them. We're going to work hard this year in instruction. But we'll work hard by using the curriculum maps, if you remember, in standards-based instruction and strategies. So that'll supplement those instructional materials in the meantime. And part of that is also using the curriculum maps for consistency and standards, and it also paces teachers so that they're teaching at about the same time through the year, which is really important. Finally, our community partners are extremely important. I just met with the Math Amigos for about an hour today. They were so excited, so was I, about the opportunities for math this year. So we're going to work closer together so that we're working simultaneously and in parallel with each other and not in different, places.
And
So
they've been
that's
really good
exciting.
about that. One of the discussions that I had with them is that, and there's nothing wrong with this, I understand that they were offering the workshops that teachers identified they wanted. However, now we have the data to look at what are key standards that we really need to offer those trainings, and we're going to try it that way, and they're open to that. The other is that we want to coordinate professional development for our volunteers who are teaching math, so that they're, because it's a different way of teaching math, quite frankly. And that's why some of our parents are having difficulty with the way the Common Core math standards are. The way that you may have learned to just do basic computation is very different today. And so some of our parents have difficulty with that, right? I see a lot of heads nodding over there. And so our volunteers have to be in alignment with what we're teaching. So we'll be working with Sabra and offering these workshops for our volunteers so that they can be on the same page with us.
The last point I have to make is what we mean by Tier 1 is that's your explicit core instruction. The statistics, the research shows that 80 to 90% of your kids should be successful in Tier 1. If they're not being successful, you're supposed to give interventions. We only provide and go to Tier 2, if you will, through our MTSS. That starts that line of, are they going to be going through special ed or not? Then they start going through testing. They go through very strict types of interventions. So our work is at Tier 1 for all kids, for ELLs, for special ed kids that are already in special ed, do Tier 1. So that's where most of our work is. So I
Now,
just wanted to make sure you knew what I meant by that.
What I do want to say, though, that is missing from both of them, and that is because of the funding. I mean, we do it to a great degree when we look at, we have, some books in Spanish, and we have some materials like that. But when we talk about fully funding, and we talk about sufficiency funding and the Ozzie Martinez lawsuit of culturally and linguistically relevant material, we don't have the depth of materials and the training for our teachers to provide truly culturally and linguistic instruction. And so as we look at, and we're doing it in bits and pieces, but not to the degree that we could. And I mean, because we barely have the money to buy the basic math materials this year. I mean, instructional materials, as you know, has not been funded for a long, long time. And so we're so behind the 8 ball. But as we look at Ozzie Martinez, and I just say this as you all talk to policymakers at the state level, we need the funding to be able to train, to hire the teachers that have the right endorsements, but also to have the materials for them. So that, because it is a big missing piece. And we did our best at our institute to have it focused on diversity and, cultural and linguistic differences. And I take my hats off to the district people that work in those departments, right, to provide that support. But we're so limited in funding.
I know. Great. Good evening, Vanessa Romero, Associate Superintendent. The next 2 slides, you'll recognize this framework. It's similar to the Read's First initiative. It's a best practice model where teachers transfer the responsibility of the learning to the students. This is explicit. It's devoting more time to the elements in the framework. It's intentional. We looked at, leader behaviors and teacher behaviors, but in that, it's, leadership, assuring that grade level teams have their data, that it's been analyzed, that they're participating in that work with teachers. We're also expecting that teachers are modeling proficient problem solving, that they're able to verbalize the thinking process in the learning. That's super important. And we're also asking that, when we create student groups based on skill gaps, that these are flexible groupings, right? Because we never want kids to stay stagnant for a year in one group. So that's really important. And so this framework has this whole, it's called the gradual release of responsibility, where time is devoted to a mini lesson. There's time devoted to guided practice. Are we ensuring that, students have opportunities to work with their peers and that teachers can give immediate feedback, right, before releasing students to do independent work or collaboration with their peers? And then in elementary, it's also including a 30-minute targeted interventions based on skill gaps. And this is core instruction, right? And so we need to understand that it's still based on the standards at grade level. The next slide is the same framework for our secondary schools. The only difference is at the bottom, instead of having that 30-minute targeted intervention, in secondary schools, the interventions or the programs are incorporated alongside students in the independent practice. So they're still receiving the mini lesson, they're still getting the guided practice from the teacher, there's still differentiated small group instruction happening during that block of time. But if they need additional supports or interventions, it's happening alongside with the student.
So lastly, assessment for learning. And this is the assessment for learning dashboard that you're going to be seeing. Our chief academic strategist and our chief assessment for learning officer will be making this next presentation. Before we go on, I just want to mention that Dr. Ryan is, working in collaboration with Deputy Superintendent Sink on implementing the computer science resolution and moving through that. And then, of course, his department with the digital coaches also intersect with what we're doing with the interventionists. And so we're working very hard to keep that aligned. I don't know if you wanted to say something before we moved on around your folks and what you're doing. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but did you want to say anything, Dr. Ryan? If you don't, that's fine too. Okay, that sounds great. Thank you. Okay, so take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Good evening, President Noble, members of the board.
Is your
Superintendent
mic on?
It's working now, okay, thank you. So it's my pleasure this evening to present along with Dr. Sarangaram. We've worked together before, and we're really excited to be able to bring to you this evening a tool that he has created for the Santa Fe Public Schools. And it's really something that we have heard about this evening already through the presentations that will aid at the local level, and when I say that, I mean at the school level, at the director level, at the district level, to go deeper and really understand what's occurring at our school sites around student achievement. We know that, oops, okay, you can go ahead and log on. We want to just indicate and mention to you that this week our principals, our directors, our coaches went through training on this tool. And we had small groups over the course of, I believe it was on Monday, principals and coaches and their assistants and directors came in to view the tool, learn how to log on, get access to it. We also want to just indicate this evening, and I believe somebody said it earlier, that the data that you're going to view tonight is from 2017-18. The PED will be releasing the most current testing SKU data that we need to populate this tool around August 23rd, we understand, and we believe by early September, and I know it's Dr. Sarangaram's goal to have it populated in his tool by September 1st.
Were you going to, I know they took the slide away. Did you want to go over this slide real
Yes.
quick of the purposes of the tool?
Yes, and so with that said, we have highlighted, and I believe this is on your paper copy, slide 41, some of the things that we believe the tool offers us at the district and school level. We believe that at the district level, we're going to be able to view all schools' data. We will be able to, with several clicks, get on the tool and be able to pull up any school that we want to go a little bit deeper about. We know that it's going to provide SS Cabinet and Cabinet the opportunity to have more focused conversations in our meetings.
And our SS Cabinet is really this team. It's a school support team. It's a team, the capital team Santa Fe, right? We're all Team Santa Fe, from the custodians to whether you're a counselor or you're processing a purchase order. All of us together is our Team Santa Fe. But this was the Team Santa Fe initiative in terms of supervision. So we kind of use the term interchangeably, but School Support Cabinet is really this team. So we meet first for 2 to 3 hours once a week, and we focus on, I think I told you that we'd be like doing case studies, we bring super principals in, it's all focused on instruction. Then the general cabinet meets after, that looks at operations and the whole 9 yards. So there's a huge focus on school improvement. With my involvement, Ms. Zink then means with her team at the CNI team. But I'm involved in instruction every week with this team.
And we also know that this is going to allow us to be better informed about the potential professional development opportunities in front of us. At the school level, we know that leaders, teachers, and coaches will have the opportunity to use the data for mentoring and support. And as Dr. Garcia indicated earlier, that is the main thing we want to do with this tool. It is not punitive. It is about supporting teachers to change instruction at the local level. We know that we want to use individual student data to gain a real good understanding for interventions. How do we plan for those? How do we implement those, and how do we track those? We know we can drill down to the standards and know which standards we need to improve upon. It's also going to be able to provide professional development, or not professional development, but aid in that conversation at PLCs and the professional learning communities. Is going to assist with lesson plannings if they choose to use the individual student reports that you'll see here shortly. All of those things can assist a teacher as they're moving forward with their planning. And then it also, just the last point around that is that it does assist in conversations with parents. It allows some real-time data as we get into this. You'll see what I mean by that, to have a more focused conversation about instruction and skill gaps if we want to have those conversations with parents.
One of the things that I found really fascinating when we were looking at this presentation, not the presentation, but the presentation of the tool, is that we could look at a school and look at how it compares to the state, how it compares, if we want to, park across the nation. We can look at it school by school. We can look at it classroom by classroom. We can look at a classroom, and we found some classrooms where there's one teacher that'll have 100% of her kids proficient. What did that teacher do, right? We can break it down to the standard and say, in 3rd grade at school X, there's 4 teachers that teach this content. And one teacher seems to be having a higher percentage of kids that are proficient. Let's look at the kids. Or what can we learn from that teacher about how she's teaching that standard? So when they start looking at this data and collaboration, and that's what we want to do. This is not about pointing out that somebody is having more problems, but rather we're all better. Just on this team, we all have different strengths. You know, we worked on this presentation together, and we all brought different elements to it. Well, the same thing at the school. It's about collaborating with each other in those professional learning communities as to how can they work together to help each other. And how can the principals, if they start looking at the data and say, okay, well, your school has very similar demographics. What's going on there? You know, how can we team them? And how these folks can also use this data. So it is so, I mean, we used to have data disaggregation, but not to this level. And been in hot pursuit after Dr. Sangram. We just keep passing, or we just doesn't work out to be able to get him, because I've seen this tool in use before. And I know with the professional development and the training that has happened and the moral alignment of materials, the foundation that we've set, I was talking to Ms. Devotee today, and she does a lot of this manually, and I'm gonna call you out, Janice, sorry about that. But this is going to save them a lot of time. I've talked to a lot of principals today that they feel that this is really going to accelerate a lot of what they've been doing manually so quickly. And so, so now take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. So we're going to focus on 5 features of the tool, and Suchin is going to drive, and I'm going to talk about it. So feature 1 really allows for a comparison across the district. So Dr. Sarangaram, if you would please, let's take a look at 3 schools. Let's just pick Pinon, Salazar, and Amy Beale. How about that?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, I ask permission from Mrs. Devotee. I apologize, my accent, I should not have too much rice today. I should have more hamburger, I think. I apologize, ma'am. I asked permission from her already to use her school. Let's say that we would like to look at ELA. What I mean ELA, it means that all 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th kids combined together. And what school do you want to compare, ma'am?
Let's look at Amy Beale
Amy Bill.
and Salazar.
Where is it? We can pick any school.
Yeah, there's Pinon.
And where is Salazar? Come on. Did I pass it?
I don't see it there.
Let's see.
There it is.
Salazar.
There you
This
go.
one.
One more down.
One more down.
One more down?
There you
Okay.
go.
Okay, let's pick this one and we go down. We're gonna see the graph all the school that we pick. And let's say that small little bit so you can see. Okay, so this one, let's big a little bit, just look at this. Just look at this is the Santa Fe Public School. We will see that the ELA, we have 28% 5 years ago. And now we have 31%. So we increased about 3%. Big picture, what I'm saying, big picture. So let's look at compared to the state. This one is state. No,
Sen-
this Santa Fe. Let's look at compared to the state. So I move to the right. Smaller, smaller, smaller. So this one is state. So we can see that state start with 26% and end up with 33. So what I'm saying, we can compare state, compare district, and compare the school, or 3 or 4 schools that we pick, 5-year data. If you want to have 10 school compare, we can do that too.
And we can break it down. So let's say we want to compare schools with similar demographics.
Yes,
Or we
ma'am.
want to compare schools with similar, say, ELL or free and reduced lunch. We can pull those schools and look at them just very quickly and see how they compare and how they're doing. So that's at the state and district level.
Yes.
So the next feature,
Yeah, the next feature, feature 2, allows for understanding how students are progressing in terms of proficiency. And so earlier it was presenting that we have 5 levels of proficiency. And so Dr. Sarangaram, if you could take us to that slide. We have 5 years of data to reflect upon in feature 2. And it does provide state, district, and school data.
Let's look at, we compare the data within the school first, okay? So let's say that I were to see ELA, or the ELA within the school.
now, are we going to mask the student names? I think we're going to have to get off this slide. I thought we were masking.
No, we don't have the student name.
Well, oh, that was the teacher. Well, we probably should just move that up,
Yeah.
though. Just move,
Sorry,
just
sorry
raise
about
it
that.
up.
I apologize it. I should do that. I apologize. I marked it already and I hit it in. That's right. So
If you don't have one that's masked, can you just tell what that does? Because at the school level, the district level, we can look at it, but I really don't want to do that
yes,
publicly.
ma'am. I apologize that. Let's look at this. So we can see this as a 4-year data from the state. In the beginning, we combine level 4 and level 5. we didn't see 5 level, level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Level 1 not met, if I increase a little bit, not met yet, and level 2 is partially, level 3 is approaching, level 4 met, and level 5 it exists standard. We combine 2 levels before, but now you can see all level 1, level 2, level 3 percent-wise. So for example, if I want to know that state percent proficiency at math 4th grade, I add together here is 18%. And I can look at 4 years of data until 17, 18. When we complete the data, we're going to have 5 years of data at 18 and 19. And we can compare state, compare district in 5 years, and compare Pignon Elementary School. So let's look at Pignon Elementary School. 4 years ago, we have 21% proficient, which is this one, and we have 62 kids in 4th grade. When we have in 2017-18, we have 82 kids, increased from 21% to 42%. Excellent increase if you add it. And we have another graph they call donut graph. Donut graph is combine all grade. Let's say 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. Let's say Pignon Elementary School. Instead of 50, 60 kids, when combined, we have 256 kids in 2014-15, and we have 28% proficient. 4 years later, we have 285 kids. The percent proficient is increased 11%, which is 39% increase.
So we're going to move on to feature 3. And feature 3 allows for understanding how many students are proficient in a teacher's classroom. So it's depicted by this graph,
Yes.
which is similar to what you just saw in the previous slide. You can see all the levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and where students are landing on there. And then you also have a sortable student roster. And the sortable student roster is where a teacher can see the performance of each of their students and sort by scale scores. And you heard earlier, proficiency is at 750. So if we highlight a student here who is maybe nearing proficiency, that does allow for teachers to strategize with their teams, with themselves, with their principal about small group instruction. It informs conversations at PLCs. It is an opportunity to really look at students by their level. And I don't know, Dr. Sarangaram, if you wanted to highlight any one of
Yes,
those
ma'am.
right now.
Very good. So in this case, we have 21 kids for this teacher. And we can have 5-year data, the same kid. If you, let's say in this case, we pick 4th grade. So we have 3rd grade data. If we pick 7th grade, you're gonna have when there are 6th grade, 5th grade, 4th grade, 3rd grade, so we can follow the kid, how they are doing 4 or 5 years. So the teacher know the kid background. But I want to give you example, this one. These students, when they are 3rd grade, they are level 1. Look at the scale score. Scale score is the same as standard score. It's 650. The teacher did very good job, even though they are same level 1 this year. But they increased 692, almost another level. So we need to look at both. You want to talk about the
Feature 4?
Yeah.
Yeah. We can pick where we can pick kids?
Yeah, you can
Yeah,
pick
okay.
Okay.
So we're going to go on to feature 4, which allows an analysis of the standards by student. And so you can click on that sortable form that you just saw.
You've got a student name on there, guys. You
Yeah,
can't.
I moved it down.
Get it back small again. They got the idea. Just
Yeah.
move it up. Just move it
Yeah.
up a little bit further. There we go. Okay. Thank you.
And so what you see here are the standards that this student may need support with or may be doing well about. And so teachers can use this at a glance very quickly to know where students are meeting that standard.
And for 1 second, Steve and Maureen, or excuse me, board members, Carrillo and Cashman, behind you, if you go behind you, you can see. So, well, maybe you have better vision than I do. But, so, for example, if you look at number 2, number in operations in base 10, right? You can see what percent the student got correct, what percent in terms of the state, okay? So you can see how you're comparing. But then as we look at our power standards, or our, what do we call them? Our essential standards. Yes, we want our kids to know everything, but there's like 5 or 6 essential standards that you have to master to really be successful in the next grade. And so with this kind of data, the teacher can really zero in and then look at how many kids, you can group them, how many kids need this essential standard. But let's just say it's a standard that I'm not familiar with teaching, okay? Well, we can look at how they can team with other people, but do you have this connected to the video?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I do it right now.
So let me show you. So let's just, do you want to pick one or that you could show?
Yeah.
So the teacher can have access to this tool. It's a one login for everybody. So the principals can log in, the teacher can log in. But let's just say that, you know, you don't have time to whatever, you just want to say, oh, I need a refresher on how to teach this particular standard. And I don't know if we got the video. Sometimes we have audio problems here.
Oh, I don't know why it's not show up. It show.
Well, anyway, with each, you get the idea, don't worry about it. But with each of these standards, there's like a little mini video about how to teach it. Now, obviously, we have far better support for that. But just say you wanted a quick reminder about how to teach a particular standard, it'll give you an example. This is not a good one, but there's others where it actually shows the teacher, another teacher actually teaching a standard, and gives them an idea. So it's just multiple tools, right, to, again, support the teachers.
And we also have the sample of the item, that release item from Paul. So
And these are released items.
Yes, ma'am.
So the
Released.
state does release items to all districts so that teachers have a sense of how you teach, how you know, what is being required of the kids, so that they have a better sense of doing that. But now, they don't have to weed through tons of data or go to the website or, you know, dig through the PARC tools. This is all just accessible at their fingertips. And then what do you want, is there another feature?
Nope, I think we've covered it. The video was the last feature.
Yeah, and unfortunately that, we couldn't make it work, but some of the videos are really interesting. So as we go to the last slide, you know, and we can get off of this, it's just that we're all committed to all children succeeding. You know, we say, go Team Santa Fe, together everyone achieves more. There was a quote that I read that I wanted to share with you today, and I'm gonna paraphrase it. But teaching is an art and a science. And it's art and it's intuition and science. And this is some of the science, but it cannot replace the art and the intuition and the relationship, because you can't really reach children unless you have a great, you know, you could be the best technician and I could have all the tools in the world for you, but if you cannot connect with that child, if you cannot have that relationship or that understanding, or if our kids aren't there, we can't teach them, or if they're hungry, or if they spent the night in a car, you know. So we have to look at kids holistically. That's why, and I'm just going to use community schools, not communities in schools, but just the community schools framework of how we support our children and our families becomes increasingly important. And I think the legislature recognized that by passing the Community Schools Act. So with that said, the team and I stand for questions. And again, there's an appendix with all the material more drilled down data if you want it, and we have so much data that we can slice and dice, and I could have talked to you about data all night. But again, thanks to all of the people in the field that are doing this work. They're in our schools every day. The action doesn't happen at 610 or at BF Young. The action happens in the classrooms. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for taking us through that. Questions from the board, maybe, as we go through the presentation, rather than calling out slides by number. We can do this more organically. Somewhere in the first five? Got a question?
I think that Maureen and I saw her too, have notes on different slide numbers if you just want to go through that way like we've done in the past. Is that okay?
I'm asking if you have anything in the first five.
Yes.
Okay.
Maureen, do you want to go first?
None of the first five.
Speaking confidence. Can you explain a little more about the multi-tiered system of support?
What slide are you on?
Oh, I'm sorry, page 4, MTSS.
I just explained that that's a requirement.
President Noble, members of the board, Mr. Carrillo, the multi-tiered system of support, again, is a system which, if a child is having problems and not doing well in the classroom, we start having this team, and every school has a team now. We'll call it a support team, in short, that looks at all avenues of this child. They look at their data, they look at their school, they look at home, what's happening, they interview the teacher, they find out about trauma. So it literally is a multiple tiered. And we use that then and along with the data, decide if we should go to testing in certain areas in special ed.
Great.
And it is a state requirement that you
Okay.
have a multi-tiered system of support. And then I think it's talked about in tier 1 is the beginning level, which Ms. Sink said, that's where most kids are in this handout. And then as we go into tier 2, there's evaluation, and then more specifically at the end.
Do you have anything on page 5? The only thing I have on page 5, attributes of a graduate, is, and the 3 things I put a little star next to were civic and social responsible, that, you know, we graduate kids that are civically and socially responsible, compassionate, empathetic, culturally sensitive, possess soft skills, communicator, self-confident. So I'm wondering, how does that translate? Because I also know we spoke about, in the classroom, we also spoke about the confidence to, you know, speak in front of the classroom and have good oratory skills and things like that. So how are we kind of back mapping from when someone's a senior to when maybe they're, you know, doing show and tell in the 2nd grade and talking before a class and making sure that we're building, helping them build those traits?
So that's an excellent question, and this is something that we are working towards. I think, you know, I think the 2 of you, when you went to, was it Philadelphia, that you said you heard a lot of people talking about the attributes
That
of
was like the new
graduate.
thing, but we were ahead of the curve on that
We're
one.
ahead of the curve, and what most districts are doing around the attributes of the graduate are they list them on their website, and that's about as far as you get. I know the state is looking at that. So we're trying to get ahead of this, and so I'll tell you what my long-term dream is that we can create and hopefully be a lead for the rest of the state. And that is that kids, from the time they're in kindergarten, could start building an electronic portfolio that starts demonstrating these attributes, that by the time you're a senior, it can be an alternate demonstration of competency if you needed it. It could be a portfolio when you're applying for a scholarship. It could be a portfolio when you're applying for a career somewhere, right? That along the way, at various grades, that we start looking at, and something as simple that, you know, beginning at 3rd grade or 1st grade, that just in our whole district, kids know to stand up and shake your hand and be able to introduce themselves and know how to give a proper handshake, right, and how to interact with adults. And we've seen some of these things happening in the charters, the charter that we went to visit. You went on that trip, where they were learning a lot of these skills. So we took these concepts and working with the community, and then you helped refine them. We came up with the attributes. What we're doing is looking at project-based learning as our first way of launching this. I think it's Gonzalez and Eco Capital. Who else was going to volunteer, I thought, this year on the pilot for project-based learning and the attributes of the grad? Which one? I think there's 3 or 4 schools that are pilots. We're working, as I said, with Innovate Graduate to look at, okay, if you have a project that everybody is, the kids are doing, that we can measure those skills and demonstrate some of this, right? ECO is another perfect school for this because so much that they're doing can demonstrate these pieces. We're looking at how can we come up with a way to evaluate and demonstrate that you have it. So we're working on we're working on a prototype around project-based learning and how you measure it. Once I get that done and we know that it can be done, then we'll start looking at what do we want around these at, say, K1, K2, what makes sense at 3, 4, 5, what makes sense at 6, 7, 8, right? What does that mean for high school so that all kids can demonstrate how they have managed this. The exhibiting grit, courage, and perseverance might wind up being an essay or a video that they make about things that they struggle with and how they got through it, right? So but you gotta start someplace, and that's where we're starting, is with project-based learning and measuring those. Once we know we have the prototype for measurement, then we'll look at and we'll work with our teachers and our principals. What's so cool about this is that this is a way of assessing that truly will be culturally and linguistically relevant, because you could have a Native American student that could demonstrate certain things that aren't being picked up on, say, the assessments, our standardized assessments.
No, great. And the thing that I would think about is the Global Warming Express at Asekia Madre that was started with Bill Beecham over there. I mean, that's because the civic socially responsible piece is really important to me, because I know that people said that after the whole Parkland thing, what is with all these kids that they're so articulate and comfortable in front of the camera and they know how the system works? And it's like, because obviously they teach civics as a core class there. But I would use like the Global Warming Express as an example of what other schools can do, because that's picked up so much steam in the last many years. So that's it for me, 1 through 5.
On this, I'm really struck at how we are leading nationally. And as you mentioned, it was very clear when we went to the National School Board Conference that a lot of other schools have come to an idea like this, but we did it sort of a year before. And this seems so important, and we spend so much time on assessment, but, you know, having watched my own child and some of his friends and that sort of thing, it's so critical that they have the social emotional coping skills to deal with what comes at them in any given year, because academics can be measured and, you know, we can teach to the test, but we've done that for a couple decades, and we really need some emotional intelligence and coping skills. And, you know, it's pretty clear that a kid can turn off from school in a year if something goes wrong, or 2 years or something like that, and maybe that's a test of grit and perseverance. But ultimately, these are the skills, and including academic proficiency, that will carry our students into the future and help them adapt for whatever the world brings them. And I really appreciate that there's this, and, you know, that we've gotten to the sort of shorthand of the head and the heart. And right now, for any number of reasons, I am looking a lot more at the heart stuff, and a lot of this is really critical for our kids and our society. So,
Hey, on that, Kate, I'm very impressed with her son, Zach, because every time he meets me, how old is Zach? 9? 8.5. He always extends his hand and looks me in the eye to say, how are you? And when we're seeing each other. And that's a big deal, a skill to learn, like you said, Veronica, you know, yeah.
and he benefits from extroversion. So.
There you go.
And with that said, also being culturally sensitive, that in some cultures, you don't look somebody in the eye, and us also being cognizant of that as well.
Okay, 5 through 10, something there? Board Member Cashman, what slide?
Slide 9,
But I'd like to say thank you to everybody out in the audience. I know you're exhausted after the first day of school, and for future board meetings, we should not have something on the first day of school just for us to consider in the future, because I can just see it like, hurry up, and we've got tons of questions.
And actually, I mean, you're welcome, if you need to go, you can go. I know that there are questions from the board, but, and please, or step out and get some pizza or get something to drink and come back in. That's totally fine.
But then I would say before you go, because there was something I was going to say at the end, but if you are going to go and, you know, you got a lot to do to get ready for tomorrow. I just want to say thank you for all you do, principals, because I've said on many occasions how teachers make every other profession possible. Principals build good teachers. And we've always believed in the district that if we have, 29, 30 great principals really building up great teachers, we're unstoppable. So thank you very much for everything you do.
And if you are leaving, which I would encourage you to leave, and we were not going to say anything against it, because I know you're tired, but thank you today for getting a first good day of school. I normally hear from quite a few of my parents, the bus didn't show up, somebody was mean to me, or whatever. I haven't heard any of those. I may hear them when I go home, but I did not receive any calls today, so I consider today a successful day because I didn't receive any calls. But thank you, but I would encourage you, I'm not going to be asking, I have tons of questions, but I'm not going to be asking any question that any particular school needs to answer.
And on that note, I would also say, I just wanted to reiterate, and this was the one thing I actually felt strongly about saying, what Dr. Garcia said to all the principals, which is lean on your district staff. Don't let the bureaucracy destroy your souls. Lean on the district staff. That is the whole point of the organization, and I appreciate that you really emphasize that because I think it's really important. And so I hope you will all communicate profusely because it will make the district better. And again, thank you for a great day. I know, I feel, what I said about that excitement at the beginning, it drops you too, that sort of adrenaline all day long. So everybody needs a good night's sleep. Thank you very much. Okay.
I did have a
Yep,
question on
on
slide
page
9. And I'm
9.
telling you one more time, time management, so leave, please leave. Because I'm going to rate you down because you guys are ineffectively using your time. Thank you. On slide number 9, what is the graduation class that has to meet 4 or above for proficiency? What class number it is?
Level 3.
Which class has to be at 3? No, it has to be at 4.
4.
I think it's the
22.
Class of 2020.
20, that's what I was thinking.
I think
Is
it's
it?
2022.
You think it's 2022?
think
I don't know. We're
this
going.
Could
year
you-
and
could
next
you
year,
get-
and after that, it had to be level 4. What I'm
Could,
saying.
could you get
We
back?
will get back to
Thank
you on
Yes,
that.
sir.
Ruth, are you capturing the questions? Yeah, we'll get you the definitive answer.
Okay, thank you.
But this may change because of the test
That's
and
right.
everything else that they're doing, so I really don't know for sure.
Okay, moving
Well,
on.
they took you up on that. That's good.
Slides 9, 10, the next 5. She did 9.
Then my page 9 is, and you may not have the answer to that, is how were the thresholds set? Oh, yeah, you said that, that's right. State chooses rates for proficiency. How is it decided? How is it that 750 is the beginning of level 4?
May I answer, Dr. Garcia? Actually, that we have the teacher and they call standard setting process.
Now, is this, okay, and this is for New Mexico?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Every state sets it different. So what we used this year was set by the Martinez administration, okay,
Right.
when they adopted Park. And it was pretty rigid, it's pretty high.
Yeah.
And so, other states, if we look at comparison to other states, they may have set the standard setting lower. And so, it's not like ACT or SAT that it's an apples to apples comparison across the states.
I see. Okay, great. And then, yeah, that was it. And then page 10, no, I don't care about that. Okay.
My next question is on page 13, unless anybody has something.
I have on
before that.
11, I wrote down, well, 11, you know what, you look at page 11.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm not saying you look at page 11, but and what really should come out, which should fly off the page to all of us, and I know it's a priority for our district, is the equity issue. We've just got to make sure, and this is all about building it at the very beginning, even with pre-K, that we've got to make sure that kids are all getting the same opportunity from the get. You know, and you can just see it on this page.
And the issue too.
And a lot of it's not
is-
what we do, because they come to us way before with all of this other stuff.
And how are we able, you know, like when we talk about trying to distribute resources equitably, we barely have the resources to provide
Yeah.
across the board. But if we look at per pupil expenditure, obviously, then you see huge inequities, and it's just because of economies of scale with small schools versus large schools. And so how do you mitigate that? And so how do we provide that additional support? And that's where if we get, you know, more pre-K money or K-5 plus or communities and schools, and if you remember the communities and schools rollout started with the Capitol High cluster of schools, right?
Yeah.
And then that got filled out. And so, I mean, I think that's how you start trying to address this equity issue. I think you looked at it in your, I can't remember the name of it now, the framework for your funding, for how we do funding.
Oh, yeah, fair student funding, yeah.
I mean, I think that was an attempt to try to do it, but it didn't quite work. And the reason it didn't work is you didn't have enough money to distribute. So consequently, your small schools or like El Dorado did not have enough money to operate, so then you'd have to give them more money. And so that, the concept is sound, but if you don't have enough dollars from the state, you can't implement it.
Yeah. Well, a lot of this has to do with things that are really out of our purview. I mean, we are the public schools, and we have schools that feed 3 meals a day. I mean, there are some, we can't do absolutely everything. And a lot of it starts before even kids come to us. So, thanks.
Page 13, Board Member Cashman.
Yes, since we are going to be adopting a new math curriculum, I would like to suggest that the schools that we've seen significant growth in math, they have more of a say in the instructional, what the instructional material should be. So we're raising the bar for everybody, because that has been my concern for a long time. So let's go to the people that are producing results and get them to be the ones sitting on a committee, and hopefully we do it at the district level.
But with that said, Ms. Cashman, I'm going to push back a little bit.
Okay.
We also have to look at those that are getting results. Are they my schools that have low ELL and low free and reduced lunch? And I got to look at my schools that have higher free and reduced lunch and high ELL that are also getting results, because we've got to look at the curriculum and the approach. And so it's a little more nuanced, a little more complicated. I agree that and this is where the tool's going to help us, because, you know, Ramirez Thomas, for example, made some significant gains. Mr. Vody is not here, but you're here, so thank you. And you could go. But, you know, as we look at Pinon, and I've talked to Ms. Devoti about this, that the way free and reduced lunch is calculated, and they're not school-wide, she feels like she's got many undocumented students that are not claiming free and reduced lunch that probably would qualify. With that said, there are some methodologies that they use in teaching math that has been very successful. We also need to look at those schools that have, say, 1 or 2 teachers that are amazing at teaching math. What materials are they using? What strategies are they using? So I think we're saying the same thing, but we're going to be looking at multiple data sources for arriving at that. And that's what's so powerful about this tool. Yes, you could dig through data before and spend hours and hours, but to be able to just click on this and click and click and click it in 3 clicks, be able to get the data that you need to help inform material instruction. The other thing that I asked Dr. Lomax and Ms. Zink is that I want to also utilize the math advisory in terms of helping also with the adoption. And so we will be looking at and also we have to look at the research-based materials that are shown to be tied to Common Core standards as well. So it'll be a bunch of factors, but yes, ma'am.
And I would just like us to try to impart to all of our teachers that are teaching math. Math is a language, just like English is a language, Spanish is a language, any foreign language. And people don't look at math as a language. And they think, you know, you've got to teach the language of math so the kids can understand it. They come and they don't know place value, number sense. It's a language, and if we approach it that way, that everybody is learning a new language, I think we'd have a lot better success. And, you know, unfortunately, I know we have even some of our staff that is afraid of the math language. And, you know, if they can talk the correct terminology, then it helps the kids, and it helps definitely in the testing.
I have page 16. Do you have anything before that?
14 or 15?
No? So on 16, I just wrote down legislative breakfast and Gadsden. And I think the reason I wrote that down is, and I know that people have made trips to Gadsden, but you know, they're pretty much 100% free and reduced lunch and English language learners. And what are they doing?
So I can tell you.
You can tell me, but, and the other thing was, yeah, tell me that and then.
I'll tell you very quickly.
All right.
So Gadsden started showing gains back when I was Secretary of Ed. And Dr. Nava, at that time, Senator Cynthia Nava, was the superintendent. And she was the curriculum and instruction assistant superintendent before that. She was way ahead of the game of standards-based instruction. And they were very much teaching and training their teachers on hitting the standards, way before other districts were doing that. So when the state moved to standards-based instruction, Gadsden was already ahead. Then I left, the new administration came in. If you look at, well, she was also a senator, so she also was able to get more funds for her district. If you go back and analyze, and this is where I got into a thing with the public ed department, because they would say, well, the districts that embrace our reforms are doing much better. And I would say, hug me, embrace me, give me the money. We would get inconsistent funding. Gadsden, Farmington, trying to think of some of the other ones. You probably know them, Ms. Rael. But there were some districts that consistently got more pre-K, got more K-5 plus, got more extended learning, got more of their principals
political supports and,
pursuing excellence, got more of their teachers in teaching pursuing excellence. And so they consistently got funding. We would get funding one year, then the next year we wouldn't get it. Then we would get it, then you didn't get it at all. Or we get it and we get a little bit. Or one year, remember it was like pre-K, Linda, that they cut, or was it K? It was pre-K, right? That all of a sudden we saw certain districts get way more money.
And then we have a snow day and get nothing.
Yeah, that didn't help. So it takes resources and consistent funding to get a program moving. And so it's that combination of having had training on that extended learning. They also get teachers and community from the Las Cruces, El Paso area also they're much more bilingual than we are in northern New Mexico. So you have a lot of teachers there that are truly fluent and bilingual. And, you know, an example, I am conversational in Spanish, but I am not fluent where I could teach kids, right? So they have many more teachers in Las Cruces and in Gadsden that are truly bilingual that can help reach the kids. So, and we've visited several districts. As a matter of fact, some of our best practices we've pulled from, like Belen, for example, doesn't get a lot of, you know, yay, but they're doing some amazing things. Yes, of course.
Members of the board, Mr. Creo, I have visited Gadsden and worked with Gadsden on curriculum when I worked for CES. And one of the things that they talked to me about was how important it was that they get teachers that are bilingual. They got most of their teachers from El Paso. We have huge trouble in finding
I know.
bilingual teachers. We've had to hire people that are monolingual Spanish teachers from Spain. And so that may sound like it works, but it's also is very difficult in many other ways. And that could go on for another board meeting, but I just wanted to say that for you.
No, I understand, and thank you. And it allows me, for those people in the community, you know, there's different people in the community that always point to certain city. You know who I'm talking about. They always point to certain districts and say, how come they're doing this? And so more knowledge around why. So thank you very much. And then I wrote down legislative breakfast, and I wrote that down as for us to hammer home. It's like, yeah, you brought us up to 2008 levels. Terrific. Thank you very much. Don't give yourselves a pat on the back, because this is what we need in order to really meet the benchmarks that you want. And I'm really, I'm optimistic about the appointee that I read about today, given his background and everything, so.
Page 17, 18, 19.
19.
Okay, Board Member Cashman?
I probably, I have my own theories on the question I'm going to ask. But why is Mandela, and it's not just in math, but it was in English language, why is Mandela making those big gains and our other schools aren't?
Well, they attract, first of all, it's an international baccalaureate school. It's an IB program. People know that it's going to require rigor. This started also last year with the principal, and we talked about it, and continued this year, in that we can't have kids just come to Mandela because they want a smaller school. So when they register and they get into the school, they are told, this is what is expected from you academically. The amount of time you're going to have to spend on homework, the kind of rigor in the classroom. So by nature, as a magnet, it attracts families and students. It's a different curriculum. It is not the same curriculum that's not the same standards. It's a much higher standard, and so I think it speaks for itself. It's an
Right.
international baccalaureate program.
Well, and I don't think you're telling me anything I don't know, but the other thing that I would like us to be tracking in the future is how many of those kids are coming out with the IB degree. Not that they've gone to, there's a big component.
There's a huge difference.
And so how many, and I think that's an important thing for the district to keep track of, is out of each class, how many chose to pursue that IB degree? Because then we've got to, if the majority of the kids are not coming out with an IB degree, we need to talk about then, what are we doing? Are we robbing Peter to pay Paul for a small school environment?
If I may, and then Ms. Singh, I think that the other piece, and I think that it's less than we would hope are doing it at this point, but we only have one graduating class.
That's my point.
But with that said, it also pulls kids from our other schools that are high performing. That would be maybe at Capitol High or at Santa Fe High or at Ortiz or at Milagro, right? As do, and that's something I didn't want to, I could mention here, is that as we look at our higher performing schools, as you mentioned, there are Farm Club for St. Mike's, for Santa Fe Prep, for Desert Academy, for ATC. If those kids went on to our middle and high schools, our performance would be much higher. But those elementaries are, again, the Farm Club for the privates and the charters.
Good way to put it.
President Noel, members of the board, specifically for Mandela, there are really two programs, the Diploma Program and the IB Program. We did have a very small graduating class. I will get the data for you on how many kids graduated out of the IB, but I will tell you that I feel that almost as important is that Diploma Program. I'll get you the information of the difference because I can't give that to you right now, but I have spoken with all of them. quite a bit about it, and he said, Linda, the amount of students that are successful in the diploma program is outstanding, and it's a great program. It's just further from a little bit further than the IB.
So my page 19 was also Mandela, and I figured as much that now that we're telling kids that it's not just going to a small school, and I imagine we'll see that number level out. And then I also imagine, to Maureen's point, that as we're letting people know the importance of IB and the diploma specifically, as we get more graduating classes, we're going to see a lot more kids and families saving $24,000 a year by going to Mandela instead of the other local alternative.
We did get more students from out of district than ever this past year, so I think it's just going to grow.
But again, I'm glad they're growing, but at what cost to our comprehensive high schools and to our comprehensive middle schools? I'm really concerned about that. We need to look at, we are not a private institution. We need to be looking, we as public school entities across the nation educate the majority of kids. So once we start pulling, we don't have enough teachers. I'm sure you're sitting there that not every classroom is filled with a certified teacher. So we take that population of teachers and we spread them thinner and thinner and thinner when we really need them to be educating the majority of our students. So, but and we'll have another discussion on that later.
We will. And excuse me, I can't disagree with you more. I don't think there's any cost at all. When we developed the Mandela School in 2012 is when we decided we were going to go on that route. It was to give parents other alternatives to just our comprehensive high schools, but because we knew we were losing them, right? We definitely were losing a lot of kids at the middles, and a lot of them were not coming back. And they had so many options, and they still do. And all we're doing, there's no cost because we're just reallocating, if you will, one resource over here and taking a part of it and putting it over here. We're not losing anything. In fact, we're gaining something because people are staying with Santa Fe Public Schools. And the other thing I would say, and this is one of the things I went to in Philadelphia, we've got, okay, I know that nobody likes to look at public schools or a district as a business, right? Because it's not. These are children, and we care about them head and heart, right? But we have to be cognizant of the competition that we have in the education marketplace. And more people are out there trying to open their charter with no accountability over with the Public Education Commission, right? And we have to compete with all of these people and all of the charters in our area and the privates. And we know that St. Mike's, even though they've lost a lot of population, we know that they're going to start getting pretty aggressive about thinking, hey, we got to do something. We're down to, I don't know what, it's like 800 kids now or something, and that's not where that school used to be. And somebody could very easily just open up another parochial school in Santa Fe, and then there's more competition. So I just think we always have to be cognizant of that, and Mandela fills that a niche for us. So I would respectfully disagree with you, Maureen, on that one.
I guess we'll be disagreeing.
Okay.
Okay, page 20, 21, 22. Board Member Cashman?
I'm going to compare 22 and 25. They're the same basic charts, just in a different way. But I am concerned, even though in science we have a lot of kids that are proficient, we also had, like Amy Beal, Adelia, Sweeney, those rates dropped, and, we can't say on one hand, we want to have a consistent 2% and then one year we've gone down 15%, 10%. What is going on that we're seeing those drops? And I don't expect you to have the answer, but I think it's something as a district that we need to figure out, because there's one thing to, show some growth, but just like when we say we're happy about an 11% gain, we should be really worried when we see a 15% drop.
And we also have to look at that again. it is different cohorts of kids, and that's why following cohorts are important, because, and we have looked at some schools, and we won't get into the detail here, but I know that we had a period of time where a teacher goes out on maternity leave. You have a school that all of a sudden in 2 grades, 2 classes in the same grade had long-term subs. A death in the family, whatever happens. So our tool can also help us go back and really drill down and look at, oh, those were teachers that weren't certified or whatever, right? Or were alternative license certified. Because again, when you're looking at a 3rd grade last year and a 3rd grade this year, there's so many different factors. And again, that's why the large district numbers are really what really tells us a trend of how we're delivering instruction. And then at the micro level, this tool is going to help us answer that more. So we are watching all of it.
I appreciate that explanation. Having spent a lot of time with economists in the first 10 years of my career, it was just listening to why the data was always terrible and what's wrong with it. But I did mark this as well, and I was wondering if some of the drops, which seem more significant, frankly, than the gains, if we think they might have had to do with the next-gen standards and changes, because this is actually a trend to me. Particularly, it does seem to correlate with the free and reduced lunch and ELL, as do all the scores, but the drops do as well.
But those schools-
But also statewide, the drop is that as more teachers are doing more inquiry-based, more next-gen science standards, the SBA on science is way out of sync. And, it has not been a priority, or they haven't had the money to change it. And so as more teachers are adopting the more inquiry-based, I think you're seeing that. I think you're seeing it statewide. And so that could be, there's just so much more that we'll be digging into.
I just want us to care as much about the gains as the big drops, because the gains may be an anomaly, so can the big drops. But if we see big drops like this, we need to be saying, my gosh, what's happening? This is just as concerning as,
Yes, it is.
so. Okay.
So I had I had this page listed as well. And I think this speaks to something that Maureen said earlier about some teachers maybe not being comfortable teaching science. And that would fall on the principal, right? To bring them up to the level that they need to be. So I was very concerned about all these science drops as well, especially given that I think in the retreat we had 2 or 3 years ago, we had talked about DeGrasse Tyson, and we really wanted to make embedded science a priority so that their inquisitive minds would stay inquisitive after they left elementary school. So that's all I have written.
Yes, please.
Board Member Carrillo, as a principal at Remedios Thomas, we noticed that we were still using New Mexico state standards to teach science, but then we got all of the I-6 science kits from Lano, and those have changed. And so as a school, we were trying to supplement to ensure that we were teaching to those New Mexico science standards as well. And I think sometimes, as a school, we just get so focused on the science kits that we maybe don't take the time to look at the New Mexico science standards. So the test also needs to change so that it's a reflection of the new standards, right? Because as an elementary principal and as a school, you're trying to supplement and balance all those standards and ensure that the kids are getting them. So I think that might be part of the problem.
Okay. So it seems like we're just going to sync these things up and see gains in this year. Great.
I'm very clear. I look at it and we adopted new standards and something happened. And so there was a change. It was a significant change. And honestly, there are a number of reasons I will say this, but I look at Salazar and I think something's going right there. And so, when you see a trend that's significant, and then a school like Salazar, which has interesting scores across the board, I'm actually wondering, with the high ELL population, 100% free and reduced lunch, does seem like something's going right.
Salazar, Ramirez, Thomas, I think are two of those schools that we are looking at, you know, kind of, but we could talk about it, right? Really looked at the data, really held the teachers accountable. I mean, you can't get away from that. If you're not using the data, and I think both the schools have worked hard to, principals to lead those PLCs, so we're proud of them.
Okay, slide 23 or 24, 25, 26, 27. Board Member Cashman?
On the AP score table, I'm glad to see the AP scores going up, but I think, again, this table bothers me. It gives me a false sense of what colleges are accepting. There is very few colleges that will accept an AP score of 3 for college credit. Most of them, and the only 3s that they're accepting are things like advanced biochemistry, blah, really a calculus 4 course. The really hard, difficult science. Most of if they even accept AP credits now, most of them, like for English and that, it's a 5 or above. And I think we need to be honest with our kids and tell them, I mean, my kids are going to state colleges. They did not, even though they passed the AP course, none of those were accepted. And so I think we're giving a false sense every time we put this table out.
Well, yeah.
And I would like us to look at UNM and New Mexico State to see what, I mean, they have lists on their websites on which ones they'll accept, but there's very few that will accept a 3.
So let me ask, because I think these tables, weren't
These
they
from
provided from AP?
Yeah. I
These
get
are not our
from the
tables.
AP.
These are the tables that are provided to us from advanced placement.
Yes.
And so, for some reason, they must think 3 and above is important, because these are this is their data.
Well, it used to be 3 and above they would accept. Now colleges aren't, so I would like us to take a look at our New Mexico schools.
We can check it.
Tech,
UNM.
UNM and New Mexico State. And I mean, they have their websites, and they will tell you, and you will see that there are very few 3s except for the really tough science courses or the tough math courses where even a 3 would be considered. And so I just want our kids to know, because I know there's a lot of pressure on these AP students to take that test because, the teachers want those good grades. And again, some kids aren't paying for it. Other parents know they're not going to be scoring a 5. But they, to dish out a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there, so I just would like us to align the score with what the reality of colleges are right now.
So then on that note, it becomes a guidance counselor issue, right? As they're building their schedules, so the guidance counselor should know all of these benchmarks and not give the kid a false narrative.
But I do want to check something. Yes, go ahead.
Members of the board, from my experience, even as a principal in high school, what we recommend to students and why we recommend AP courses is not because of the credit in college. I mean, that's a personal thing, where they're going to go. We do talk about that some colleges do give that credit, but the real reason that we go after AP is it has proven research and correlation to taking a college class and doing well in it, much higher than a regular course does. It's just, at this time, that's what the research shows. And so kids they just get more practice writing, for instance. They get more practice in problem solving. When I was a principal, I actually had those AP teachers working with my regular ed teachers of understanding Socratic questioning and higher order questioning and all the things that the great strategies they use in AP. So if we focus more on why it's important or why it's great to take at least one AP course, that's why PED wanted kids to take an AP course, because they're great courses.
Well, and we actually did that when we did the high school redesign. We wanted kids to graduate to take either an AP, an online, or a dual credit. And the reason we wanted that is to add more rigor to the high school curriculum. If a kid took an AP course and could get the college credit, they were most likely to matriculate, but also the reasons that Ms. Zink stated. If they could take a dual credit course, you demystify taking a course in higher ed, right? If you take an online course, more and more higher ed is going online. And so that's the intent, but I have to follow up on this and ask Dr. Sarangarm, because the data is all provided to us from AP. Do they provide us a breakdown of 2s, 3s, and 4s? Because, I mean, 3s, 4s, and 5s?
In terms of the, yes.
Did they give us that data?
But they give individual students, so I can analyze.
Individual
1, 2, 3,
students, so we'll
4,
have to
5,
go
yes,
through
ma'am.
and we could probably pull it, but this is the data that they put out.
I guess I don't have any, and I probably agree with Ms. Sink on this. Yes, the reason to take an AP course is to get you in the rigor for college. But a lot of kids and a lot of parents are thinking an AP course is going to save my kid from taking that course in college. And it's going to save me money. I mean, and let's face it, they're not paying for K through 12. They sure are paying after that. It's going to save me money. And I think we need to be honest with our kids. You have a better chance of getting college credit when you take a dual credit community college course. And we know, I mean, you know, we know which ones the state is required to accept. If you take this, it will cover. And so I just want us to move away from this. I feel it's a false narrative to move away from this when there are very few kids, and the more elite schools aren't even taking AP courses. So I would rather, you know, the narrative is it is better for you, you will be better prepared, you know, but very few kids are, you know, especially with the 3, you know, it's like, you know, so thank you.
On a personal note, I got a 3 on the AP Art History test out of Santa Fe High. This is the course that has most enriched and informed my life, aside from maybe AP English, of any course, because I would not have known or in any way experienced what I experienced in AP Art History in any other way. And truly, I still, anyway, it's the most important course I ever took, and I did not get college credit for that 3. Okay, page 28, 29. On page 29, I kind of want to know what's going on at Capitol. This is a huge number of students. Is this, it's mostly juniors and seniors, right, that take AP courses? So by my math, that's like half. I mean, it's a lot.
It's really exciting that they're upping the rigor. But yet it doesn't reflect when we look at percent proficiency in math. And it goes back to a lot of our more advanced kids are taking those other classes. I think that, as you know, the high school redesign, that was the intent, that it would raise the rigor, and it's growing. So some kids, there's like Marty, I can't think of her last name, I just was in her classroom today. She teaches AP. I was in a Spanish literature AP class, and I know it was amazing. And I think those teachers have a reputation of being amazing teachers, and so more kids sign up for those classes.
And even though the students with a 3 and above is percentage-wise is higher at Santa Fe High, the numbers of students in AP classes are really significant. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, we had about 300 graduate at both high schools this past year. So with 335 total AP students in 2019, it just blows my mind in Capitol. Anyway, that is really cool. Page 30, onto the plan of action, 31. I think I already made my comments on page 32. I hope everybody will work very hard to, make sure the purchase order doesn't destroy a principal or whatever bureaucratic hurdle it is, because there's always one, and I know it's hard to predict what it will be, but
It can be a smart board, it can be a parking lot issue. It could be
exactly,
air
painting a curb.
conditioning, It could be flooding, it could be any number of things on any given day.
Mm-hmm. 33, 34, Board Member Cashman.
So on 34, and just when we were going over, it prompted me again to ask for data. What data do we get from the community, which I know they provide us, from the community college, how many of our kids, when they leave our schools, are in, I don't know what they're calling them now, whether developmental or remedial courses. What is it that, how many of our kids are going? We get the information. That, I
We
think
have
that's a
it.
good benchmark for us to know. I mean, I know we don't get it from Tech or from, UNM or that, but we get it from the community college, and that just, for us as board members, I think is a good indication of how many we send over there and how many have to be, after they take the AccuPlacer test, are not qualified to begin those.
And the other problem that we're having with that, Opportunity Santa Fe, we actually share a data person, so it's the community college, Santa Fe Public Schools, and the Santa Fe Community Foundation. So if you remember, Opportunity Santa Fe set all those goals. And so they are looking at how many of these kids require remediation, how many actually finish, how many are in the workforce. So we can provide you that report. What we are finding, though, is that you have a lot of kids who do not take sort of they're not in thinking that they're going to go post-secondary ed, so they take classes that aren't as rigorous, and then decide, oh, I want to go to college now. And so, they may have taken, what were some of the math courses, like algebra,
Financial literacy.
Well,
or
no, but
things.
there's like an algebra class, it's like algebra concepts or algebra something or another.
It's really hard to hear.
Well, but that other course that you have talked about for the kids that are struggling to get it to Algebra 1.
The course you're talking about, though, they still have to, by state law, is take those other courses like Algebra 1. But I agree, they're not taking calculus. They're not taking those kind of courses. But the bottom line is, until we in Santa Fe get our scores up into those 40%, you're always going to have kids to have to take remedial in math. When you're only getting 10%, those people that are not proficient are going to be remedial. So we've got to get the math up at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So.
The first question is, do we still use mid-school math? There was something called do you remember mid-school math? It was at DeVargas and Aspen, I think. It was a really cool math program. I just wondered if we still use it.
I haven't seen but one school pilot mid-school math. They're starting to pilot it, but we'll have to see if it's on the list for us to adopt and have a choice to adopt. We're not sure. It still exists. I'm just saying I don't know of any school that uses it we're using My Math, and we're using New York. What's the New York one? Engage New York.
All right. No, I would just defer to you all in terms of what's good. I just remember them coming here one night with a demonstration
Yes.
of the different ways they used concepts and real-world things, like this whale's got to make it this far,
Yes.
and whales. I don't know. It was just really fascinating.
Taos
And then-
came to us and
Was it?
presented to us too. Taos, they're big in
Yeah, it
using
was really
My Math.
cool.
Yes.
And it was so interactive, and there was art involved and all these things to just engage their minds. Okay, so this page is really interesting to me because it reads like an accountability metric, okay? So making sure that if I were a principal, I would have, there's this list of things here that I'm asking of my teacher, and then I'm using this to basically evaluate their performance. We've all asked them to do these things, and so it would seem like when the principal is either doing an observation or doing an evaluation of the teacher, we want to make sure that they're, because this says, as evidenced by, so we want to make sure in some way we're keeping track of that, so that if there are teachers that are not really showing evidence of the things that we really want them to be doing in the classroom, that the principal is then notating that, and then as we get higher, then I guess it's Team Santa Fe, right? The people that have all the different schools that are then holding the principal accountable. It's like, look, we just noticed when we were in this class that none of this is going on, but you as a principal have no notes in the file that none of this is going on. So that would, when I read this page, when this is over, tear this out is my idea of how Team Santa Fe is this is their accountability metric. Am I correct
I
in
mean,
thinking
it
that?
does result in accountability, for sure. We're not using it as a gotcha, but it's an expectation that, you know, as we have, I mean, because we really have to think of where we were when we started and where we are now, right? We're not treating every school as their own CEO, and this is how you, we're a system of, we're not a system of schools, we're a school system. And in the this is like, Pinon has the Pinon way, well, this is the Santa Fe way. And this is the expectation for everybody. Schools that have been successful pretty much do a lot of this. These are best practices.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had given people flexibility, right? And kind of getting them there, giving them the tools that they needed. If I had come in my first year with this, I'd probably been run out of town. You have to, because they didn't have the skill set, they didn't have the relationships built, the training, the concepts, right? And so we're at a place, we've been building a foundation, more schools doing this. But here's the deal. I think a lot of our higher performing schools have kind of been left off the hook because, you know, they pretty much perform high. But quite frankly, with those economics and support and parental involvement and PTCs with a lot of money to pay for a lot of extra things, those schools could be doing a lot better too. And so all of us, all boats rise, we all need to do better, and it also helps the principals because, right? I mean, if Loretta is making certain principals, her teachers do certain things, but other schools don't have to, well, they're gonna flee to some other school. I don't wanna be with that mean principal that makes me teach 90 minutes of ELA or 90 minutes of math or whatnot. When it's the whole district, it's a lot easier. It's how we're all working together to have the best out for kids, not necessarily because I want a better test score, because I want my kids to have a better quality of life. We're going to break cycles of poverty. That's why the North Star is so important when we talk about these things. It's because I've told them, you're going to have different tests, you're going to have different secretaries. Why are we doing this? Why did we get into this work? Because we want our kids to have a better quality of life, to have an opportunity to be whoever they want. So we drive it from the higher order of why we do the work. But yes, at the end of the day, it is an accountability tool. But we don't lead with that, but we are expecting it. And you have several people wanted to chime in on what I said.
President Noble and members of the board, and Dr. Garcia, I just wanted to provide a little bit of context to why this. In the fall, several of us drove down to Belen, and we sat with the Gil Sanchez principal, who had something similar. I will say that ours is much more robust at this time. Linda say better. And so we wanted to really experience what they were doing and understanding how this principal was motivating teachers and yet creating a place where they knew what the expectations were of them every day. So Board Member Carrillo, what you're saying resonates for me because that's what that principal was saying. We're a team together, and a team together then creates expectations together. And so we saw some of this work in Belen, in Farmington. We actually had the Farmington Assistant Superintendent come out and present to us. So we took some time over the fall to really kind of digest different models for improvement and for expectations, and this is what we've come up with.
So this is our own?
Yes,
And
it
this
is
is all
all our
done work
own.
that's been done with the
Yes.
Superintendent Support Cabinet,
Yes.
which was the change last year that we started meeting just the instructional cabinet and then the other.
This looks to me like it's quite a bit of work because it's fairly simple and clear. And, you know, I just think management is hard, and this actually creates a framework for principals to guide, and I think it's great. Board Member Cashman.
Well, may I at one point?
Yeah.
The PLCs, though, they've been working with these professional learning communities. In our schools, they were in different stages of sophistication, right? And how does a professional learning community really work? Some principals had different levels of sophistication on how to lead them. with the tools and these folks getting more on board and the framework, now the PLCs with that tool have a structure for their discussions about improving instruction as a team. It's more explicit. It's been happening. It's not like a lot of this stuff hasn't happened, but now it's all packaged in a framework and it's clear and it's for everybody.
Just a question, are we using pacing guides district-wide in all
Do
of
you wanna
our
talk about that,
subject
Linda?
areas?
Board, Ms. Cashman, if you recall, we've been building and we have completed building K through 12 math and ELA curriculum maps, which is that chunk through units of standards that you teach, right? What we did with teams of teachers, we built that unit with this chunk of standards, and they agreed how long it would take to do that. So with teacher input, we built the pacing guide right along the curriculum guide, so it's not something separate. And it's not something we imposed on them. They helped decide how long is it going to take to teach this and teach it well. And then when we go and Dr. Garcia made a comment just a couple days ago that actually happened to me, is you go in and you're looking at a teacher still teaching the caveman days up in January. Something's wrong.
It was like the Vietnam War, I think, or something.
Well, that was my real life
Yeah.
case. He was still teaching in caveman history, whatever. So prehistoric history.
Well, and I, having been a teacher, I know teachers say I have to teach where my kids are, and maybe I can't keep up with the pacing guides. But the other thing is, we have so much mobility in our district, it is unfair to those kids to say if you're at 4th grade or whatever, and now you move from Salazar to Pinon to Cesar Chavez, and you're not even in the ball game. You're still on chapter 1 and everybody. So I think it's just important for the teachers to understand throughout the year, a reminder, if you send little newsletters or whatever you do, just remind them why it is important to keep that pacing up, because first of all, you're not doing the kids any favor. You might have to do intervention to get them up to the speed, but if they move around, and move from one school to another because they've changed apartment complexes or whatever, it shouldn't be up to the receiving teacher to say, oh my gosh, they're 10 chapters behind. How am I going to get them up there?
So there's 2 points for a pacing guide, 2 huge. One is the one you mentioned. The other one is even in the school. If you have 2 or 3 grade level teachers working, in order to have good discussion, they've got to talk about that particular standard, that particular lesson. That's why they keep up with each other. So they have something to talk about at the PLCs. So.
And this is where the skill gaps is important. And Ms. Inc. has purchased some of those materials. And then for middle and high school, we have 2 very robust systems for skill gaps instruction, also for that reason.
Okay, moving on. Page 36. Yep, Board Member Carrillo.
So 36, I had this idea. Okay, so because on 35 and everything, we spent a lot of time talking about, teachers and principals and accountability and all the different things, and I learned this from, I don't know, it was like 3 national conventions ago. But the idea of parent responsibility, and because no matter what we do, because we have them from whether, 8 or 8:40 in the morning until 3, they can undo everything. And it's so challenging. And that's why so often when like even this morning, I was at Wood Gormley, and I always go there the first day of school, and the parents are there, and I thank them. I say, part of the success of the school is the parents are involved in the school, because we know, and it's the same at Pinon, we know that where parents are involved, kids succeed. And so the idea I had, and it was from this, it was some small district in Indiana, and the idea being that the teacher can, on their cell, say, this is what I've just sent home tonight, or this is what we're doing this week, and this is what I need you to do with your kid, or to make sure that they do. And I mean, on a very consistent and religious basis, and use no robocalls, no flyers, a cell phone. Because like it or not, that's how all of our teachers, even those that may not have computers in their homes, they all have, I mean our parents, they all have cell phones. And it's just a way to say the lesson for this week is, and even just down to the day, it's like I've just sent my class home with this work, and if there's a way that you can make sure that you read with him at the lower grades, or you can just make sure that they do this. And I know it's complicated, but I also know, and you know, where you have professionals in the homes, where education is a priority, or even in those, how many kids we have at Capitol, for instance, and you know, Kate brought this up earlier, we see so many kids go through AVID that are the first to go to college, but they're in a house where both parents, no matter how many jobs they're working, they realize that education is a priority and the parents are playing a key role. So that was just this idea I had of just on a daily, definitely weekly, but on a daily basis, send it home on the cell.
I had a question, and maybe Tom can help us with that. You
So
said
I
no-
would just-
You said no robocall, so how would they get it? Is it a text?
If
A
I
text.
may,
Oh,
right
text.
now, I think a lot of schools, I mean, I'm on Class Dojo, which is an app that the teachers communicate through that, and they do send pictures of spelling words, give us the lessons. I mean, it's all through the cell phone.
Great.
And it's
You're
a
at Gonzales.
closed
It could
system.
be district-wide, you know.
Dr. Ryan, you want to
Yes,
to
we-
chime in on that?
We have several apps that the teachers are using, and we're looking now at a tool that's telling us what apps they're using so that we can consolidate on some of those. The other challenge we have as we've gone and interviewed at schools, what we really need to do is bring those messages into Spanish. We have so many of our families that have not been successful in an American education system. So our second challenge is how do we make sure that we're not creating another barrier? So certain kids get these resources, but others don't. So we are having that conversation. We are looking at the apps that teachers are using.
And then I think the other thing was, I didn't do a page. Maybe it's not this page. Oh, wait. It was something that you had shown, Mr. Sangarm. The one where you said, Steve, if you want to turn around and see it over there. It was just, are they receiving data in real time?
Yes.
Okay, great, great, thank you.
Which is another thing we couldn't do before.
Yeah. No, that was really cool, that, what you showed us, those tools.
On 37, I just noted how important it is, and it sounds like we're getting there, to coordinate with volunteers around the math, because I've talked to, and you know, of course, volunteers are uneven, just as teachers may be, but they don't actually work for us. They volunteer, so that is something, and I've just met a few, and I can tell that some of them are really good at tutoring, and some of them are not as good. So, you know, I was really glad to hear that the professional development and bringing volunteers in is part of what's going on. 38, 39. This also is a great framework to me. It makes a lot of sense to me,
Did
I
we do
think.
37 already?
I just did 37. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Did
I'm
you have
sorry.
something there?
My only note on 37, it just says PED pre-K. It just, the idea that they've got some sense of numeracy when they get to us in kinder. And then that's going to be with, I imagine, Dr. Garcia, you working with the new guy whose name I don't remember. And just somehow making sure that we prioritize, and I know this is your work, Kate, pre-K, so that when kids come to us, they have their sense of numeracy and the alphabet. Because, I just, and the whole thing, Math Matters thing, I think this is brilliant. Linda, I just was really impressed with kind of the way you built on Reads for Santa Fe, Math first, so, great.
We worked on this document, it's like you said, it all looks easy when you put it out here.
It's been a
Yeah.
team effort, and
Oh, yeah.
it's been intense, and lots of hours. And I'm very proud of everybody pulling together for all of these pieces. It's not, it's everybody working together on it.
I think the definition of expertise is when something complex looks simple. And on pre-K, you know, I think it's pretty clear we need more slots, which is something, you know, we can and should advocate for. And something that Dr. Garcia and I had discussed, and I didn't actually manage to find it, but of course I didn't look until an hour before I was coming here. There was a presentation done at something that the United Way hosted by, now I can't even remember his name. I think his first name was Chris, but anyway, from the Erickson Institute, who talks about the word gap and what kids are entering the K-12 system with very often when there isn't a sense of numeracy and some other things that pre-K can help with. And in terms of, and I would like to get the presentation and share it with the board, but ultimately what he talks about is, his point is boiled down to this: we are asking an impossible task of our K-12 system because the gap is so large upon entering kindergarten, and that it is statistically impossible to make the gains without things like year-round schooling, because of course that time would matter. But he's done a lot of work to look at what the K-12 system is expected to do when we have wildly large achievement gaps beginning in kindergarten, and the conclusion is that a lot of what the K-12 system is being expected to do is actually simply impossible. Anyway, I will share that presentation, which I think is fairly self-explanatory, though obviously the man behind it is also an important part. Board Member Cashman.
On slide 39, are we giving our high school teachers a little bit of training on, you know, this differentiating learning and everything? Most elementary teachers do that. They've been doing that for years. It starts changing by the time they get in high school. And so, you know, if we're just assuming that our high school teachers, in not just math, but in all of these, just know to do that, they don't. And so are we giving some help to those professionals, because high school is
Go
very
ahead,
different.
and then I'll fill in, and Vanessa, anybody else who wants to on that one.
Members of the board, if you would look at this whole process here on the 712, and you look down at that differentiated instruction small group, that's why we're almost forcing, if we force this, if you will, expect this, then I think the level of concern of the teachers will be, if I'm not good at this, I need help. And we're trying to push in and do more coaching. So I think it's going to get better, because now it's getting more serious that you have to do this. We've got to do it. So.
Anybody else before I chime in? Go ahead.
I'm going to say the same thing Linda did, and I think we have an opportunity this school year to ensure that we're, like Dr. Garcia said and Linda, going and pushing into the schools. And so we're working with Carnegie, their professional development in math, and they're well aware of the framework, and we want them to use that framework when they're working with teachers in our high schools or in our middle schools.
And I think that part of the work, you know, that Linda did with Santa Fe High, I think is demonstrative of that. But around the math, and we have already a program, you know, where the kids accelerate to get their credits, but there's another portion to that that we haven't been using to the level that we can. Edgenuity has a skill gaps system that can help teachers when they're, I mean, when you think about all the kids that they have, and to try to individualize instruction is very difficult. That, let's say, when we give them this tool and they find out that your problem is, let's just say, they never learn how to do ratios. And so now they're in this higher math class and the kid doesn't have that and they're moving. They can plug them into Edgenuity and they can get that skill gap done for them. You know, they have access to technology in their classrooms so that we're giving them more tools. The other tool that we also have that Ms. Sink brought in is Mathia. So we have Mathia and we have Edgenuity. We have not been using the power of Edgenuity to the level that we can, and I learned about that someplace else. Mr. Chavez also has experience with that, with Edgenuity, working with schools out of the country, right, in Germany and whatnot, in the, what were they called, the Department of Defense schools. And so he has that experience. So that together, I think we're going to be able to give our secondary and our middle school teachers more tools to help individualize instruction for the skill gap.
40 and beyond. Board Member Cashman?
On 41, I love the dashboard. I love what you showed us and everything, but I was also trying to read the audience as you were talking. And in order to use that dashboard and use it effectively, and, you know, and I know you're aware of the workload that your staff does, but, you know, I could see they say, there's one more requirement. You know, what are you taking off my, you know, if we think this is important, is there anything we can take off their plate that is maybe not as important, so you get really good buy-in on this? Because, you know, I mean, you know, already our principals and assistant principals, they're working long hours. And so, you know, you can only ask a human to do so much before they just say, I can't do it all. And so if you say this is a priority, then.
Well,
And
before you
that's
answer, because I want to comment on, because I think it's going to be germane, is I don't look at it as a requirement, I look at it as a tool. And if they learn to use the tool, it just becomes part of their day.
I was out at 12 schools today, Ms. Cashman. I think it was 12. Did we make 12, David, today? And we want to hit all the schools before the end of this week. But I asked every single principal that I talked to how they enjoyed or didn't enjoy, Dr. Sarangarm's presentation. And to a T, everyone that I spoke to today felt like it was going to save them time.
Right.
And so I think what the trade-off is, if we had this framework without the tool, can you imagine how much time it's going to take? I don't know, you know, if anybody else wants to add on that. They have a different perspective, and it could be that they're tired. Maybe they really just like, yeah, I got to do one more thing, and people are rolling their eyes. But it is going to save them time. And as they get to see I mean, you can't just do one in-service and they're going to learn how to do it. They're going to get multiple opportunities. They're going to be going out with these guys out to the schools and doing it, meeting with it, you know, and they're going to have other staff, the instructional coaches, the interventionists, the digital coaches that will also be trained, the CNI staff. All of these guys are trained to help them. And so the schools that are really advancing know how to use data well and do it all by hand.
Right.
So this is going to save them time. So that's a trade-off. We're giving them more time. But the rest of the team that you've been talking to folks, you know.
I just want to say that they're very excited. They do look at it as a tool. One thing is it will help them with their 90-day plans. Before, if you recall, they would call an office of assessment or data, and they would have to wait their turn, get on a waiting list, if you will, per se, and wait until they get their data. Now it's data at their fingertips. Data could be used also immediately, and I've known a few principals already to have the PLC data conversations. So those are very powerful. It's PLC conversations around data. Oh, PLC, no, PLC, Professional Learning Community. So those are, just at the fingertips. I wish if I was a principal with this tool, I would be in heaven.
I'm glad you're saying that. Because I'm a data junkie myself, and I would be using, I did it without something like this because data has to drive you. But I also know other people, they would get the data and it would be file 13 or in the drawer. So I just want us to be aware that, we ask a lot already. And so they're only human, and not everybody says, well, I'm going to work 24 hours a day. And we need them to not do that because it's not good.
Sleep and eat. We need them to do that. Board Member Carrillo.
So it would seem as though, and this would refer back to page 35, if we found out after the first year and the second year, they did put it in the circular file, and they didn't really want to use the tool, then it would be incumbent upon the principal to say, híjole, what the heck, you're not using these great tools that we gave you. And, right?
We'll
Because,
know right away.
yeah.
Dr. Ryan?
We have now tools that look at which one of our applications are used. In the past, with Schoolzilla, we had data and they weren't using it, so we got on and said, you got to go in there and check these. So they would do that, but it wasn't meaningful. So now we've taken that away. This isn't a tool that you're using. It's not beneficial. It was just an administrative overhead. So now that we're looking at actual use on tools, we can do a couple things. Are you using it? Have you ever used it? Do we need to provide you more training so that you can use it well? So I think we've reduced a lot of the expectations on principals to go through a bunch of stuff and trying to hone it in on the stuff that's meaningful to them.
So just to reiterate, Schoolzilla was a requirement, I think, from the previous administration, but they weren't using it, and then it wasn't populated properly. So then that frustrated them because they didn't have the data in there. So we actually, met with a company. They wanted to know if we were going to continue. We reviewed it as a team, talked to our principals, and Dr. Ryan is right. We're just trying to take the tools that don't work away from them and create things. And I think we're looking also at a district-wide dashboard for some other stuff that is being created for us that's going to give you as policymakers access to some really interesting information. So.
I think the tool's amazing, and it will focus resources, I think, in a way that will be significant. And I'm glad to hear you say about the professional learning communities, because I just think on some level principals will need to, and anybody using it, talk about how they're using it and even learn from each other. Okay, anything else? Board Member Cashman?
I have one thing, and since we don't have board discussion, I do want to bring it up. It's just a comment for us to be aware of, and I know you're probably already all over it. But my question is on our lunch program. With the Trump administration, I know it's going to be contested in courts, but mid-October, if you are a legal immigrant, and you are receiving any form of public assistance, and I would think free and reduced lunch, because SNAP, you could have your green card taken, or you could be denied further your citizenship. So I'm afraid that if we've got people out in the community, and obviously to get free and reduced lunch, we have to fill out forms. And I know we have some schools, but what are we doing? Are we going to try to track? Are we seeing a drop in it? Because I know I probably, as a parent, if I was in that situation, there's no way I'd be filling out a form. So how are we going to try to be proactive if we see a drop in those applications? And maybe everybody isn't as worried as I am, but I think this is a bad thing for us as a country, but I can see that it's probably going to affect our school lunch programs.
It's a complex answer, and so I'd rather do that at another meeting. But we have had some meetings with the PED, with the Center on Law and Poverty, and this was work that we had started when I was at Voices, with around how you qualify and community-based qualification. We do not collect immigration status, but so many parents don't want to fill it out. So it's whether you use census data or you actually use free and reduced lunch data to qualify for Title I. So it's all intertwined, and it is complex, and we'll be happy to come back with that, probably not at the next meeting, but it is something that not only Santa Fe Public Schools, but Appleseed Organization as advocates, as well as the entire state, is looking at this.
And I know it's going to affect everybody, but probably the states that have a more larger migrant population could, and so, I'm worried if, as a parent, I won't fill that out. That doesn't alleviate the hunger in my kids that need it, but I'm not going to risk, so I just think we need to be a little bit proactive. It's going to be tied up in the courts, but whether it's an injunction, I'm just concerned that we may have parents that right now feel I'm not filling out those forms. I would rather see my kid go hungry than have to potentially be deported from the United States.
So, at your discretion, in terms of when you're ready, let's put this on an agenda as a board discussion, because it's also something that's important to communicate to the community about. Thank you. Board Member Carrillo.
So since I imagine the next thing on the agenda is the, whatever the next thing is, I just want to say thank you. This was so thorough and so informative for me and so enlightening. I just want to say thank you very much. Because, you know, preliminary numbers that we get in July or wherever, no, they don't show all of this. And I'm very impressed. So I just want to say, I mean, I know you all work tirelessly when you put together these presentations. And Dr. Garcia, thank you very much. I'm just very impressed by all of this tonight. Yeah.
And I would echo that, and, you know, I was, and I told Dylan as much, I was really disappointed in the coverage of the newspaper, because I think they managed to take an incredibly nuanced subject with a lot in it, by definition, and make it into, it was a hack job, and make it into a little bit of just, oh, look, one person says this and another says this. I think it was a real disservice in reporting, frankly. But I appreciate the more fulsome view, because even as I read it, it was like, wow, I need some time to sit with this, and some explanations from people who really understand data and can tell me which are the same students, which is the cohort, which are the different ones, where we changed curriculum, and, you know, all of the different things. So anyway, thank you all very much. Maureen?
And I would also like to say thank you, but I wasn't in a position to tell you guys you could go home. So, because you'd have to answer the, I sort of bullied them into having to go home. But the other thing, can we just please keep a track on our enrollment numbers? I don't know if we're seeing anything, but, you know, the fear of coming to school right now for many in our community, and I don't know how we approach that, but we may see a decline because people aren't just going to
We
send.
have an ADM team that's already started, right, and has already been named. And what was the first day they're meeting? So we look at where we shift and whatnot. So yes, we have a team assembled, and they're working on that right now.
So kind of on that, and do we have a system I mean, I know our schools are safe zones, and I know that every super here, I mean, around the state, I imagine, their schools are safe zones. Is there a system, like a phone tree system or something, if we see something happening in a school, boom, this something's activated, and Mr. Salvidas knows, and then we know, and we can fly into action, and board members, we can lay down in front of their buses and do whatever we need to do?
We do not allow unlawful access by ICE. If a principal is uncomfortable having to deal with that, we are there to support them. And if it gets really weird, then I will be there.
And if they're even near our school, I mean, we'll be there. I mean, it's just like,
but now,
we're not gonna-
sometimes they do have the proper documents and whatnot, and then we run into another situation. So what our policy is that we do not allow unlawful access. However, for example, when that family was taken, or the father and a couple of family members outside of one of our schools, I think it was outside El Camino, if I'm not, it rippled through the school, attendance went down, all kinds of things happened. So we provide behavioral health support, you know, to the school. We offered, you know, tell the parents also to have plans for who can pick up their child if they have to, you know, not be available, or if they have to not, you know, go away for a little bit, like what happens if the kid. So we've done a lot of work around that, and we'll have to revisit that again, just like we do our SAFE plans. But we have a very sophisticated way of communicating when anything happens from a shelter in place to something like that. And Dr. Wright? Right, right. Yep, yep.
Okay, advanced planning. We are having an executive session on the 20th. Any changes? No? Okay. I think we're done. Thank you all very much. This meeting's adjourned.